And we do have probably a lot of information to the school committee to convey with the town council before we come in at 7. So if I could ask for a roll call from Mrs. LeBoy, please. Yes. Yes. I need to. All right. Okay.
Glenn Shibley,
I'm here.
Greg Labasanier,
Here.
Kerry McGee,
Here.
Karen Carlson,
Here.
Deborah Bacon,
Here.
Graham Waters,
Present.
and Nick's gonna be late.
Yes, he's on his way.
Okay, and I believe we'll ask the school committee to do their roll call too, please.
May I please have a roll call of the school committee?
Catherine Patnode,
On her way,
absent as of now.
absent as of now.
David Florio,
Here.
Ian Dixon. Here. Donna Colunian. Here. James Pearson.
Here.
Craig Levis.
Here.
And Lori Andrews.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time then, if I could ask for everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Mr. Spearman, will you do us the honor to lead us off?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we do have on the program invocation, so if you could remain standing, please bow your heads. Dear Lord, we ask for your blessings this holiday season. We ask for your guidance. We ask for your love. We hope all of our family members are safe. We pray for the soldiers and the public safety officials that protect our country, both here and overseas. Amen.
Amen.
And Mr. Spearman, on the evacuation plan, if we need it, please.
Yes, take for emergency, the two exits in the rear, just go to your right or left, and I'll take outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on, off, I'm off, I'm on. Just like to welcome the school committee here tonight, and of course the town council and our citizens. We are going to begin our first hour discussion, hearing from Mr. Levis, and of course addressing the council as well. So it'll be a back and forth conversation with the issues that the school department and the town will be facing for the coming year. So Mr. Levis, I believe I turn it over to you, unless Mr. Waters, you want to say a word or two to begin with?
Mr. Superintendent, please take it away.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody being here. It's nice to actually have people in the audience. A lot of times when we go through the budget process, we're speaking amongst ourselves. And I think one thing that we believe in is trying to inform the community as much as possible, being as transparent as possible. Doesn't mean that people are going to agree with what we put forward, but again, it's nice to have an opportunity to present to the council. So tonight, basically what we're doing is we're going to be going through our 3-year projections and talking about the landscape in terms of the financial situation. I have the easy part. I'm going to talk a little bit about just some of the highlights of this year. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Sarah Mangiarelli. Sarah is our Director of Finance. It's nice for us to have a full-time Director of Finance. Sarah is not only our Director of Finance, she is a parent of 2 children in the school system, and she's also a resident of Coventry. So it's nice to have someone and she's a phenomenal CPA. So just to start, I wanted to highlight some of the 2017-2018 school year to date. So we're almost halfway through the school year. It's hard to believe that we actually begin winter. I'm looking forward to when those days start to get a little bit longer. I don't know about you, but these short, dark days don't do me give justice here. So some of the things that we've accomplished this year, we've implemented 6 new advanced placement courses. We have an English course, advanced placement, an Italian, advanced placement, a Spanish, a French advanced placement course. We have a U.S. history and government advanced placement course, and we also added a music theory advanced placement course. When you look at the standings in terms of high schools in the state, one of the indicators they look at are our advanced placement course, those opportunities. So we've added 6 this year. We also had one of our schools recognized as one of 28 commended schools. These are the top schools in the state. And what's interesting to note is our high school was only 10 points away from being commended, which is pretty significant. So we're talking about the 28 top schools in the state. And that elementary school was Western Coventry. We also have, we were recognized as one of only 2 school districts with substantial district level improvement in the science NECAP scores. We all talk about the STEM initiatives or STEAM initiatives, and science being a big part of that. And we had some of the largest growth in our science scores in the state. We also had our Washington Oak Elementary School. They were featured on National Public Radio for a program they do called Playworks. It's recess. It's a structured type of opportunity for students to participate in different activities. And again, we were an exemplar in the state for that program. And then we had a lot of individual recognitions. We had Lauren Hopkins was one of potentially 48 individuals in the country, teachers, to win the Milken Award. And we had an incredible celebration at Coventry High School for that. We also had Sarah Hemmendinger, who was identified as the Elementary Art Teacher of the Year. We had Amy Siema, who was identified as the Rhode Island School Counselor of the Year. Diane Cowell, out of Hopkins Hill School, is the president of the Rhode Island School Nurse Teacher Association. And then finally, Lori LeBron of Feinstein Middle School. She is the president of the Rhode Island School Counselor Association. So we have a lot of accolades. We have incredible staff, incredible students, incredible families. And we feel that, we're definitely moving our schools to compete with the best in the state. So we wanted just to identify some of those highlights from this year. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Mangiarelli for the rest of the formal presentation.
Okay. Is this on? Can everybody hear me? Okay. Great. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to come out tonight and speak to you. And just before we get into the numbers, which is not the most exciting part, we wanted to start off this slideshow with what we had done so far, the highlights that Mr. Levis had just presented, because while we get caught up in the numbers, this is still all about the children and the quality of the education that we want to provide for them. So while we go through this, I just want to make sure that we keep that in mind going through this. I've had to do a lot of digging to look at not only where we want to go for the next 3 years, but to try and get a handle on where we sit right now. A lot of the assumptions that I'm using, I'm basing it off of where I think we're going to end FY18 as opposed to the budget FY18, because I did have to go through almost every single expense line and revenue line to make sure that the budgets that we were presented are how we're actually going to end that year, and that was really the baseline. So to go through some of the budgetary assumptions used for revenue, our state education aid was reduced, or is anticipated to be reduced for FY19 by $711,000. All of the factors in the state funding formula are final except for the enrollment. Enrollment is used as of the March 15th. So the property values in the state compared to Coventry, the median family income in Coventry compared to Rhode Island is all final. The only thing that will change that will potentially impact that reduction of $711,000 is our enrollment. Tuition revenues are remaining constant with FY18. We are currently reviewing increasing our preschool tuitions. It won't be a significant increase, but it will generate a little bit more revenue for us. However, we're also losing students from our Career and Technical Center program. So in order to keep that revenue the same, we'll need to continue to market that program and draw students back into the program. Medicaid revenues are showing a slight increase from projection based on what we've historically received, although there's a lot going on in Washington right now, so how some of these federal programs will come down, that's still somewhat up in the air. Our other revenue is remaining constant. We're not expecting an increase in gate receipts or miscellaneous reimbursements, including the cell tower revenue. One of the changes in our budget that is different from the past several Coventry schools budget is I am not projecting the use of fund balance. Coventry schools, in looking at some of the details, has been running on a structural deficit for the past several years because we've drawn down fund balance from WB Community Health, which is where we purchase our health insurance, and continuously drawing down on our reserves. The use of fund balance is not necessarily a bad thing if it's used for one-time expenditures, but when you're using it to plug a budget hole, it creates a long-term structural deficit. So as of right now, I have $0 included in the use of fund balance. Again, going with the budgetary assumptions used for expenditures, we are in negotiations right now with our teachers, and we will be starting with our support staff as soon as we wrap up with the teachers. So there are no impacts for negotiations, retirements, and or staffing pattern changes. We do anticipate that there will be changes as a result of all three of these items, but at this point, it's too early to really put an accurate projection in place, so we left the staffing patterns constant. We are also in the process of reviewing course loads at all of our schools to make sure that we have the properly staffed programs, which may result in shifting FTEs from one school or one course to another, but that we're really kind of trying to drill deep to make sure that we have the proper alignment and teaching and support staff for all of our programs. So as of right now, the only increase in salary is the contractual step increase for those on steps 1 through 9. Benefits are currently projected using the following assumptions. Again, these will change as a result of negotiations. I have a 3% increase for health, 1% for dental, 0% for our life insurance, as that's stable through the November FY19. FICA and Medicare was adjusted to match the appropriate portion of salary. That was one big issue I've noticed in the FY18 budget, is that was not properly budgeted for based on our total salaries. I have a 4% increase in ERSRI pension, which is for our teachers, and a 2% increase for SRP pension. And then for all of the others, we have 4% increase. The biggest other benefit expense is our workers' compensation. Other expenditures for supplies, purchase services, utilities, we've really had to kind of go through and budget and adjust those to actual for FY18. Utilities look like they were a little short, so that had been adjusted. One of the big areas that was deficient was our out-of-district tuition. We have one particular school that we had budgeted 11 students to go to an outside pathways program. We have 23 going in FY18 and an additional 5 going next year. That had to be adjusted. We also have a 3% increase in our transportation contract, although we are looking to see if there's any way we can eliminate or reduce the number of bus runs to keep that expense under control. I also have an increase in furniture and equipment of $100,000. That is not for external capital such as leasehold improvements, building improvements. That is truly for equipment repairs. We have a lot of Chromebooks that are coming into the building, and as those are damaged or broken or they come to their end of life, in order to continue using those machines, that costs money to keep those up to date. I also have had every single elementary school principal request some of the most basic necessities such as tables, chairs, desks. This year I allowed all the principals to go line by line to put in a detailed request with explanations of exactly what they wanted and needed to run their programs. And I brought this up to the school committee because I think it's an important point when a principal has the option to choose between educational software to advance our students, but they need to choose to purchase things like furniture and chairs. That really needs to be noted. We as a community need to make sure we have those basic purchases in the classroom so that they can move our students forward. We know that the budget is extremely tight, and with things such as the reduction in state aid, we've had to take a proactive approach with both our revenues and expenditures. I've had several meetings with RIDE to make sure that the calculations for the funding formula are accurate, that I can tie into the information that's being used. Also to try and challenge some of the numbers that are being used, especially comparing it to some of the other communities around. We've been working very hard to make sure that our student data is monitored closely. The correct capturing of students who qualify for free and reduced price lunch has a direct impact on our state education aid. So making sure that we have all students identified in total and their status captured is extremely important. We're proposing increasing our preschool tuition rates. The special education department and the finance department have worked closely to make sure that we're identifying all Medicaid eligible expenditures as well as all high cost students for special education reimbursement so that we can maximize those reimbursements back to the district and the community. We are reviewing our career and tech course offerings to determine if there's a way that we can generate more tuition in students so that we can be more attractive to those communities around us, and also to try and create programs in-house to prevent students from wanting to go to other districts. And we're also exploring other options. Mr. Levis may jump in on this now or later about looking to see if we can tuition students in from China. On the expenditure side, as I mentioned, we are in negotiations, so the salary and benefit packages will change as a result of those. We're reviewing all staffing course loads to determine what programs are overstaffed or understaffed and how best to utilize our human capital. We are currently exploring going out to bid for our healthcare package to ensure that we are offering the best healthcare that we can offer our employees at the lowest cost for the community. Principals have completed their own budgets. Being new to the district, and we've had a lot of new central administration here, to have a real handle on what those schools need, and the need is varying between all of the different elementary schools. All of the principals were required to complete their budget by line item, by subject, with a detailed explanation and send that up so that we could review all of the expenditures that are going in to the school's budget overall. We're reviewing all software, curriculum, and equipment to make sure that it aligns to our educational objectives. We're evaluating our out-of-district tuition costs, especially in the areas of special education. We want the kids to stay in their community if possible, but that also requires us to have the support to be able to provide the services that those students need. And we are reviewing all of our purchase service agreements, such as transportation and other consultants, to make sure that we're maximizing the dollars that we spend. I apologize, this is a little bit small, but this is essentially the summary of our FY19 projections. I have this broken down by the different categories of revenue and benefits, similar to how we report out to the Auditor General and how I report out on a monthly basis to the school committee. All of the assumptions that I had just noted are really the genesis for how we got these numbers in the FY19 projected column. You'll see in the first two columns I have the FY18 adjusted budget and the FY18 projected. That's as of November 30th, so that's a fairly current projection, and that was the basis for the increase or decrease for FY19 based on those assumptions. I'm going to jump to the next page because I know really why we're here is what that means to the local appropriations. This request that is before the council, again, a preliminary estimate of where we anticipate the budget coming in, is probably one of the most significant that's come before the school committee and the town council and the taxpayers in most recent years. You can see at the top the 2018 local appropriations. What I have is our 2019 preliminary local appropriation needs for a requested increase of a little over 1.8 million. What I did below that was to show some of the budgetary changes that we've had to handle and absorb as a school district below that we had not come back to the taxpayers or the town for. FY18 reduction in state education aid. Last year, around April, I think it was right after the public hearing, we received notice that we were going to be receiving $535,000 less in state education aid than we had been told. And then 2 days later, we were told that we were going to receive $233,000 less in federal aid. The school committee did not ask the town for any additional funds to cover those deficits, even though other communities in the state that experienced that type of loss did go back to their towns. We did what we could to eliminate the new hirings of additional staff. We cut out some initiatives that we had planned for FY18, basically to cut that almost $800,000 out of our FY18 budget. We have an FY19 projected reduction in state education aid of $711,000. An increase in tuition out students, as I had mentioned, we had 11 budgeted and we have 23 going out now for an additional $199,000 in FY18. And 5 more that are supposed to go next year, which would be an additional $66,000. And as I had mentioned earlier, the adjustments of benefits specifically related to the FICA and Medicare to actual, which is $136,000. So as you can see right there, it didn't take long to get to 1.8 million of negative budgetary experiences that we've had to handle as a school district. So while I know that increase in local appropriations is significant, it really truly is just getting us back to almost the bare bones of where we were in 2017. How that will compare to the total tax levy is on the next slide. Basically what I did for FY19 and 20 is I have the maximum tax levy. Should that go to a maximum tax levy, what the school's proposed increase is as of right now, and what that would mean as a balance for the town going forward. I can open it up to question and comments, and just before I do, this is obviously at a very high level and we're very early in our budgetary stages. Most of the assumptions that we're working off of are preliminary in nature, but we do hope that going forward when we have these budget hearings and workshops that we have representatives of the council and the community there when we dive into the details a little bit deeper and start looking line by line at this, so that everybody has a handle on the budget that we're proposing, because it's obviously going to impact all of our students and our community at large.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Mangiarelli. First of all, I'd like to say how pleased I am personally that we have a full-time finance director for our school department. I think I've stated that over the number of years that I've been on the council, and it's just too important of a topic, too important of a department, and too important financially to the town residents to not have one. So thank you for accepting the position. I know Mr. Levis and the school committee, are very pleased with your work thus far, and I know that you're certainly on top of the numbers. I guess my question initially to have one is that we've taken, I've seen the hits from the state aid, from the federal aid, more hits from the state aid, and losing or having to pay for additional students in the, is it PATH programs, I think you said, is that how it's termed?
Right, they're
Right.
called pathways. Yes.
Pathways, I'm sorry, okay. So I understand all the figures pretty well. Just wanted to ask, are other cities and towns in a similar situation as we find ourselves in Coventry? As far as you know?
Yeah, it's split. There are some communities that are on the quote-unquote winning side,
Right.
and some that are not. One thing that we have to remember is that when the funding formula first came into place, Coventry was on the quote-unquote winning side.
Right.
So there was a 7-year period where this community received an additional almost $800,000 to $900,000 a year for 7 years to get caught up.
Mm-hmm.
It was always warned that FY19 was going to be that cliff. Once we got up to that level, that additional state aid was going to drop off. For the most part, it looks like some of the winning communities are going to take that hit a little bit harder because that phase-in is not there. Some of the other factors that are impacting us, recent valuations in property. Coventry's property valuation is higher than the state's. Coventry's median family income is 19.6% higher than the state's. So all of those factors playing in are having a negative effect. I did look, there was one community in particular, Cumberland, that I saw very similar trends, and they are on the winning side of about $1 million. And when I asked, it was really the timing of when their property valuations were there. So even to be on the winning side, the way that this funding formula is, now that it's live, you could be on the winning side one year when you have a property valuation that goes in your favor, and on the losing side the next year when those numbers aren't as favorable. So now that we're live, all of these hits are almost in real time. Student enrollment changes are going to be real time. Property values are going to be real time. So it's somewhat split community to community depending on where they're at.
And one other point, I mentioned the last council meeting, as far as the advertisement for the workshops, for the career and tech programs, I was happy to see that. I know, I guess that was in the reminder, but the next front page of the Journal, it was Ponagansett. They had got the Journal reporters up there, but either way, it's good, and those workshops are continuing, right? Was it one of 5 that we're having in the town, or other towns, to try to get the students in to Coventry, which is good. I welcome that, and I thought that would be a good idea. I don't know, you've had 1 or 2 so far, the workshops, Mr. Levis? And any overall success that you...
Well, we're looking, I mean,
don't know.
we've talked about this with our committee. We're looking at our entire
Yes.
career tech program to assess, are we producing individuals that are getting into those high-skill, high-wage
Right.
positions? We're working with, we're working with other agencies, working with, hopefully, Mr. Mike Sabatoni, who is the International Building Trades, and he has a program that's grade 11 and 12, because we need to also find a niche.
Right.
You know, if you look at Rhode Island, you have 4 or 5 communities that may have the same type of programs, and so we have to compete. So we're looking at everything. We're looking at the numbers. If we have programs that aren't attracting students, we have to make some tough decisions. But we definitely are looking at the marketing piece, and we're looking at marketing our own students earlier, starting to go down to 7th grade, even expose students in elementary school about the concept of having a career. So I think we recognize that we need to be aggressive in this area.
Right. And I also I'd like to compliment the school on all the award winners, our instructors, and the honors, and our students, and the improvement of the grades. So with those comments from me, I'd like to open it up to the other members of the town council and school committee members to converse, ask any questions, or communicate their concerns. Mr. McGee?
Yeah, I just got one. Of course, I know it's very preliminary, we're not really looking for a 4% change in the levy, but we're really early in the thing. But you did mention something about a 3% increase in transportation. I thought we were contracted already. Why would they increase in the middle of the contract?
That's actually our contractual agreement. So
Is it?
built
Right.
into the contract was a contractual increase every year. So 3% is the FY19 increase. And then after FY19, we'll be able to go back out to bid.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Other questions or comments of the council?
I've got a couple of
Yes.
questions, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that I noticed, Sarah, in here is we had a reduction in federal aid last year. Are there any expectations or thoughts on what might occur in this next year for a loss of federal aid?
There's
I
a
mean,
lot
obviously
obviously
we-
going down
yeah.
right now in Washington, so
Yeah.
to kind of guess what's going to happen. I haven't had any solid information that
Yeah.
any of the title programs are definitely being cut. I don't know if that's come, but they have been cut almost every single year for the past several years.
Yeah, so if, I mean, I'm just looking at the dollars. I mean, last year, we lost state aid of 535 and federal aid of 233, and now we've lost 711. Would the, comparative percentages be, I mean, if we went comparatively percentage-wise, would you be looking to, come up with those numbers? I mean, obviously, if federally, that would be a big hit as well, too, if we had another one there.
Right, because...
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Right, so most of our title programs, our federal programs, it is salary-based, and those programs are going to run. Those aren't really programs that we can eliminate. So as federal dollars are reduced, that really just shifts that expense to the general fund.
Right.
At that point, then we would need to go back through the general fund, especially in a situation where we were last year, where those cuts came in so late, we had to make last-minute shifts,
Okay.
which is why we eliminated some of the initiatives we had planned to do in
Right.
FY18.
And obviously, it's getting more difficult each year.
Right.
Now, I've got another question, and don't know if you can, so with all things being equal, and we have not put any of the new, obviously, negotiations for any increased salaries, et cetera, what would say a 1% increase in teacher salaries add to our needed monies? Would you be able to have that number, or?
It is. It's about $160,000.
So on a 1% increase, and that would just be salaries, alone,
Right.
so
Then
about
there's payroll
160,000 per
taxes.
1% plus the payroll
Right.
taxes on
And
there. So,
pension and whatnot. So,
yeah, okay.
Right. And that's why we are really driving down to look at what we can do in the healthcare realm. Salaries and benefits are by far our biggest
Right.
expenditures,
Yeah.
so we're looking to see if we can maximize savings in the healthcare area.
Yeah, it's, so with the, with that, just even at 1% on there, it's, we're, like I said, we're, with the numbers preliminarily as they are right now, at 4% increase on the levy at that, and then any other increases. So we've got, needless to say, a difficult budget year, coming forward here.
Right. Unfortunately, this hit really as a perfect storm. We had the funding formula cliff that happened. We had the loss of federal aid that we weren't anticipating last year. We hit negotiations this year, and we had an increase in out-of-district tuition. So almost every one of our big costs was hit this year.
All came in
All
together.
in once.
And as well as be happening on the town side as well, too. So.
Right.
So, yeah, it's making it difficult on both sides. But thank you for your work. It was very good.
You're welcome.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I just want
Mr. Florio.
to say what a great job Sarah has been doing, and she's been working with Mr. Tebow on a number of initiatives as well. And they work something we haven't seen in a long time. The town financial person working with the school committee financial person, and they work very well together, as does the superintendent and the town manager. They've accomplished a lot, including making Oak Haven Elementary School, between the town and the school department, making that the site for the maintenance department for the school department. It's very gratifying, Mr. President.
I hear what you're saying, and cooperation definitely can only help. Mr. Tebow, your name was just mentioned. Would you like to make any comments regarding our discussion, or any questions that you might have as we approach the new school year and the new budget, and our budget and their budget? Feel free.
The only comment I would have is that the $1.88 million request is 2.63% on the levy.
Okay.
It's the only thing I would add to the conversation. I thought Sarah did an excellent job in her presentation.
Okay, I thought so too. Thank you. Other questions at this time from either the council members or the school committee members? Any overall comments? Like I say, we're...
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'd like to make one comment,
Yes,
please.
Mrs. Dixon.
I'd like to mention that during the past year, we have been reviewing our policies relating to the operations of the school, the operations of the school committee, and we've made many, many improvements. So we now have regular reporting financially from our financial director. We've also put in financial oversight policies, and we also have put in certain policies that require us to approve changes from line to line, category to category. So I want you to be assured that we have greatly improved our observation and our understanding of what is happening with the monies that are being raised by our voters. And that's important for you all to know. We're not taking this lightly, and we know that we're going after an increase. We feel very strongly that it's very important to support the programs of our schools and our students.
I agree. Thank you for your comments. I also know that we've had some new employments. Mr. Levis, they're working out fine, as far as I know, grabbing a couple new employees from East Greenwich School
Yes.
System.
Yes.
One being a principal in a elementary school and one middle school?
And our special ed director also.
Very good.
One at the high school, assistant principal, and also, like I said, our director of special education. So I think
I think I've mentioned to you, I was over at my dentist in East Greenwich, and the pendulum was just ringing with the citizens being not real happy, I guess, with the school, overall, the school situation. So I guess their loss seems to be that Coventry's gain, and congratulations for that and the school committee. It's always good news when others are upset that other individuals go to other towns, and those were the good individuals as far as the comments were in the newspaper, and we hopefully reap the benefits, which is good. Each grade, each teacher, each class, and that's a good article I read. Other questions? Any other comments?
President, I'd like
Yes.
to add one more comment.
Please do.
I recently met the chairperson of the Cranston School Committee
Yes.
at a social function, and the first thing he said to me is, "You're taking away our best people." So we've had
That's
some
true.
hires from Cranston, and that was the first thing he said to me. He said, "Please stop."
Don't listen.
No, I'm not listening.
Okay.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Florio.
The principal at Tioga Elementary School
Yes.
is the principal you've been speaking about,
Yes.
Dominic Giusti.
Yes.
Very, very great addition to our
Excellent.
school system.
Very good.
Compliments to
I
Mr.
don't believe
Levis
I've met
and
him
the
yet,
hiring
but I'm looking forward to it. Yes, Mr. LeBossinier has another one.
My question is, just seeing as we're talking about the tax levy earlier, Mr. Tebow, what is the state's cap on our tax levy this year that we have to abide by?
4%.
Is it 4% even this year? Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Okay. Mr. Waters, I know you
Yeah,
must have some
I'd just like
comments.
to add to that. Bob did a quick tabulation of what the total known costs are going to be for the town's budget. These don't include operating increases, but things such as medical increases, dental, pension obligations. So for the total known costs for the town's budget for FY19, we're going to be adding an additional $711,000 to the budget. And that comes out to just shy of 1%. It's approximately 0.99%.
Okay, and I guess these are set basically in stone as far as
Yes.
we're going with. Okay? All right. Well, it's obviously going to be a tough budget year for a lot of different reasons, and our school department, of course, is one of them, but it's obviously education, as everybody knows, is so important to our future. our future Coventry, our future students, our future country, of where they go after they get out of high school, and what type of jobs they end up with, and how much they can offer to our state and our country and their families. So, it's expensive, but the other choice is don't spend the money and don't get the success and the quality and what have you. So I don't have any other questions myself. Let me ask one more time before we take a short break before 7. If there's any other additional comments or questions. If not, I do want to wish I know the school committee will be staying, but I don't think I started with wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and a prosperous one, let's hope, and a successful one. So I guess I'll end at that, Mr. Waters, and we'll take a break, approximately 15 minutes, and we have some refreshments behind us. So please feel free to mingle, and we'll be back to begin the regular meeting with the legislative representatives. I see at least 4 have arrived out of our 8. Maybe I saw another one in and out, but we'll take a break and we'll be back at 7. Okay?
did a poor job of it.
Yeah.
But they just gave me some
Okay, we're on.
information so
Okay.
we can like rattle.
All right, that was a struggle.
This sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
All right, welcome. Good evening, everyone. Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year coming up. I would like to welcome our state delegation, our members. We have two of our senators, I guess, both of our senators, and we have four of our representatives, which is a great turnout. We have Representative Nardalillo present, Senator Raptakis, Representative Serpa, Senator Nick Kettle, Representative Chippendale, and Representative Nunes present. One thing, we got an email from Representative Roberts, which came to Town Manager Waters, which she asked to be read tonight, so I will do that to start off with. Thank you for the invitation to the meeting. However, I regret to inform you that I've had both a death and a birthday within the family to deal with at this time. Additionally, I have already requested the annual meeting to be scheduled for a more convenient time as opposed to within 1 week of Christmas, being the most challenging time of the year. As such, I will not be able to make tonight's meeting. I would really appreciate it if you would please consider rescheduling the annual meeting during the slowest time of the legislative year, which is January. I knew the slowest time probably would be all months outside of June, but that's only an inside joke. So read, and she would be here otherwise, and I haven't heard from Representative Morgan, but 6 out of 8 ain't bad, as they say. So, welcome, our delegation. Welcome again, our school committee, Mrs. Patnode, and also the town council. And as the legislative matters, we have an agenda to discuss. We have number 1 listed, discussion on state aid for Coventry schools, which of course proposed by the Coventry School Committee. So Mr. Levis or Mrs. Patnode, if turn it over to you to start off with legislative matter 1, please.
Sure, thank you, and we appreciate you, to our legislators being here tonight, and I appreciate having an audience also. Like I said, it's nice to talk about, just to have faces and people to listen to these conversations, because a lot of times we have these conversations amongst ourselves, but it's the community that this really impacts. So this is more of a dialogue, but we know that over the last 7 years, the state had identified Coventry as being one of the districts that was underfunded in terms of the state aid. So over the course of 7 years, we received approximately 700, 800, close to 900,000 some years. With this year was supposed to be the last year of the implementation of the funding formula. We knew after that we would be level funded. What happened to us last year was, as they moved towards more full implementation of the funding formula, somewhere in April, and this is well into our budget process, we had been notified that we were receiving a reduction in state aid of about $533,000. And that had to do specifically with our free and reduced lunch population, a decrease. We received this year projections from the state, which had us projected level funding for the next, was it 5 years? 5 years. And then 2 weeks later, we received numbers from the state that said, in FY19, we're going to be reduced another $715,000. But this wasn't due to population numbers. This was based on looking at the ability for Coventry to pay. And so what the state has done is, in adjusting the formula, they've looked at Coventry having a greater ability to pay, and therefore reducing the state share of funding. And I guess our question is, based on this, as Sarah said before, just using live data, that this funding formula, it seems to be very volatile, especially the way we do budgets. And, many people have said, well, you have to budget very conservatively. But we heard from the town that just to cover basics this year is about $700 and some odd thousand. So I guess what we're looking at is there any thought in terms of revisiting the funding formula, or at least having a smoothing out? I know Senator Rep. Dacus, you had brought up several times when we spoke about some form of like a maintenance of effort on the state side, because it's very difficult for us to budget, not knowing, when they'll adjust property values, when they'll look at the income and use that to adjust. So again, we were one of the, we've lost over $1.25, $1.3 million in state aid over 2 years. So last year, instead of getting an $800,000 increase, we received about a $300,000 increase. And again, we know we'll probably have cuts in federal aid, but we don't know what those cuts will be. A lot of it has to do, as you know, they give the money to the state, and then how the state will allocate that. But last year, we received a $238,000 cut. So we found that it's very, very challenging, and just looking for some support and some ideas from you about how we should move forward and approach this.
Well, basically, Mr. Superintendent, in the past years, I've introduced with my colleagues legislation that is called hold harmless provision, meaning at the end of the budget year, if the town of Coventry, say, received $30 million, that the following year, if we can enact this legislation into law, you would not receive less than $30 million. And I think that is just not only a benefit for Coventry, but I think for all the school districts around the state. The issue is getting it passed. Again, there could be a cost toward the state, because if the state, like you said, Coventry received, I think it was around $825,000 more than the previous year. This year, even though that $800,000 above and beyond was reduced down to about $329,000, it's still technically a loss of $500,000. But if that bill was enacted into law, there would be you would receive that same amount of money plus that $800,000. So the state could not either roll back or make a reduction, regardless of the issues of low to moderate income. I think was the school lunches. There were some formulas involved where the reduction took place. But again, if I'm going to put the bill in on the Senate side, and I believe my colleagues in the House will do the same. But the issue here is try to get the bill passed statewide, which makes a lot of sense for everyone.
Say something on that. It does make sense, because we are forced as a council to use it with maintenance of effort, and we can't reduce any payments to our school committee, our school department anytime. So it really does make sense, and it would help us a lot if we could guarantee that money every year. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments regarding number one? Representative Nunes.
Yeah, Mr. Levis, I'm just trying to understand exactly what the cut was last year. You said there was $533,000 loss in the free and reduced lunch population. Was that due to a decrease in enrollment of those students, or what caused that
Right.
decrease?
There's a formula calculation, so they identified that we had 150 less free and reduced lunch students.
Okay, so it wasn't really a cut from the state. It was that the students were no longer going to school at Coventry, and so the money that you realized from that reimbursement was not fully realized.
So, yeah, it doesn't have to do with the students weren't going to Coventry, but they might have qualified for free and reduced lunch. We were concerned because of the whole UHIP piece, too. We're still concerned about that. We're not sure. We've had to go in families that have been eligible for free and reduced lunch last year, but they may not be eligible this year, because it,
Could be an error in
an
the
error.
system
So we've
or
had to have those
eligibility.
families, we've had to almost target those families and say, please fill out our free and reduced lunch form.
Right.
So we spent a lot of time looking at the data last year, but it shows the timing of that. So for instance, we start the budget process in October, November, at early November. By the time they use data, the state uses data on March 15th. So we spend a lot of time daily looking at our data to make sure that our data is accurate. So by March 15th, that's the cutoff point where they look at that data and they apply that data to all the funding formula. So last year, that was a big part of it. However, moving forward, one of the major issue is that the state is saying that Coventry's ability to pay is greater. That's what the state is saying, so that the formula has been reduced. So they're saying that the town of Coventry needs to pay more and the state's going to pay less. And so my question is, I guess there's a couple questions there. One is just how the formula is applied. They use a date of March 15th. That's awful late for us in terms of the budget process. Last year was April when we found out what the cut was going to be, and we had already come before the town and asked for a budget to be approved. We'd submitted our budget. This year now, they're saying, well, Coventry's ability to pay is greater. And so another part is that, do you as the representatives agree, and are you going to help us in terms of promoting that Coventry, the community, based on the funding formula, their ability to pay should be greater? Because that's what the funding formula says, that property values have gone up, income has gone up, and therefore the state share is less. So there's a lot of variables to this, and I look at it as so volatile. I think the intent of this formula was great. It was really looking at a community and population, but the way it's applied, it can change from year to year. How do we prepare for that? And it's easy to say, well, just be very conservative, but it's very, very hard. We have students with incredible needs. We've had a large population of students with special needs moved to Coventry, and I think because of the quality of our programs, which is great, but it's also, we don't budget for that. So it's very challenging the way the system is in place now. And so we're looking for some guidance, some support around working with the funding formula. That's why even the smoothing out process, it took us 7 years when they said we were underfunded by about $5 million. It took us 7 years to get up to a certain a level. And now within 2 years, we've been cut $1.3 million.
Mr. Levis, may I interject for 1 second? Mr. Levis, may I?
Sure.
Ms. Mignorelli, the average income, according to that, is how much? Because I think you'll find this very interesting, Representative Nunes and Representative Serpa. This is what the state says our median income is in our communities.
Right, and I just want to flip to that page. I did hand out a packet of additional information, and Ed, I don't know if you want to pull up the slides for the rest of the community. I can take that mouse back too. But if I may, before I get to you, Mr. Florio, I just want to back up a little bit and address some of the points that you raised as well. So just to go back, for FY18, we were originally projected to receive $800,000 in additional state aid. In April, that cut came in as a result of our March 15th data that showed the decrease in the student population. So we did receive an additional $300,000 in revenue. It was just $500,000 less than we had expected for FY18. For FY19, and it's a little bit gray up, or it's a little fuzzy, but on this screen that you can see in your packets, it's a historical state education aid and local aid. For FY19, they're using the same exact student enrollment as FY18, and that's important to point out, because typically we say, oh, if your state aid's going down, it's because your enrollment is going down, and that does happen. Thank you. But for the projections for FY19, you'll see that they're using the same average daily membership and free and reduced price lunch of $4,619 and $1,362. That hasn't changed from FY18, yet we're showing a real, true decrease of $700,000. So this isn't like last year where we thought we were going to get $800,000 and now we're only getting $100,000. We're truly being cut $700,000 this year from where our base was. And that's assuming population stays the same.
Well, can I just interject there for 1
Yes.
second? And you guys have verified that the population or the enrollment is, obviously enrollment hasn't gone down that much. You're just talking about the difference in students that qualify for the free and reduced lunch.
That was last year.
That was last
That
year.
was last year. But yes, one of the things that we did find out, and we are actually tackling that this year, we found out because of the issues with the UIP state system at the state level, we have been told that anybody who is on direct certified, usually those are no-brainers for us. If they come in as direct cert, they're automatically qualified. There's a 3 to 6 month time lag with those applications being processed. So now what we're doing is we're looking at all of our direct certs from 2 years ago, comparing it now. Anybody who's not on that list, they're getting an individual letter from us saying, please complete this free and reduced price lunch application so that we can count it. I can't say for certain because I was not here at that time whether or not that March 15th data had students that were truly missing from that free and reduced price lunch population because of issues with the collection of that data.
And there's no reimbursement for that.
There's no reimbursement. We will be holding off on signing that March 15th student enrollment data this year until we're 100% certain on it, because once that's signed, that's the information that RIDE will roll with. And RIDE actually did indicate that even if there is a delay in this information for the direct certs, they have to go with whatever information is in the system as of March 15th. That's why we're going to basically take the burden on ourselves to do everything we can to capture those. And then if I can just touch base on Mr. Florio's question, a few more pages in, let's see. Oops, my
And
cookie
there's
plate
no
was on the
waiver process to get a little more time on that March 15th date?
No, that's pretty much hard and fast because they need to finalize their budget for the state. So whatever those numbers come in is where we'll be.
Sarah,
Oh, is my,
is there a portion of that population that maybe, is embarrassed because they don't want to ask for that free and reduced lunch? Is that, and they're not being counted also?
That would be consistent, though. I think, we don't feel that that's the biggest part. I think the biggest issue this year is, if you look, it's the property values and the income has changed at the state's share. Last year was 48.7%. For this year, for FY18, for FY19, it's projected at, it's 45.9%, and that's not going to change. That has nothing to do with.
And I understand that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that, they're saying that our salaries have gone up, but there's still, we probably still have a portion of people that don't even go after that.
Right.
That could qualify. So, they're not even counting that. And,
Correct.
How can they say that, our salaries have gone up and, your free and reduced lunch has gone down when, there's so many factors involved there.
Right. Unfortunately, they do have to go off of data. So what we do as a district is our principals are very good about sending out requests. Even now, switching into the winter season, we have a lot of families who may have changes in their income status, whether they were landscapers or seasonal employees. So we make sure that we send out additional notifications to say, you might want to complete this form. There's no harm in completing it. You can complete it as many times as you want throughout the year. And as soon as that status is registered as free and reduced price lunch, that does get retroactive to back to the beginning of the year. So it has a positive effect for our whole average daily membership. Just getting back to Mr. Florio, in your packet that has additional information, the equalized weighted assessment value. So there's two parts: the equalized weighted assessment value of the properties Coventry compared to the state, and then the median family income Coventry compared to the state. So I just put a little summary in here, going back from 2011 to 2015 on the EWAV. 2015 is what they're using for the 2019 budget year. And if you look, in 2011, Coventry as a percent was 2.8. Now it's 3.0, so that just shows you that our property values compared to the rest of the state are trending higher and are increasing, which is having a negative effect on the state share. And then below that, the median family income in Rhode Island is $74,000. The median family income in Coventry is $88,000, which is a 19.6% change. Again, that factor plays into the funding formula. So even though we have a no projection of a change in our student enrollment as of right now, the factors that are hitting us are the median family income, and the EWAV is negatively impacting our calculation.
Sarah, what was the median family income one more time?
In Rhode Island,
88, no,
Oh.
in Coventry.
in Coventry is $88,556.
Okay. How many people in this room make
Doesn't matter.
$88,500?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. How many people in your district, Representative Nunes, makes that kind of money? I don't know of anybody in my district that does. Representative Serpa, Senator Reptakis, you know anybody who makes $88,000 in your district?
May I ask a question? Do these numbers come from a census?
Yes. Yep, and the packet, this is funding formula summary. This is basically the information that I pulled from RIDE's website that is the detail to the calculation, and I did pull the census and verify that the numbers that they were using are correct. So as far as the pieces used in the calculation, those I can agree with. It unfortunately has an extremely negative impact on Coventry.
Basically, by looking at what you have given us, I just went back, I found one of the bills I had put in, 2008, it's S2397. If you want to take a look at that formula in that legislation and see if that's going to be enough to be sufficient for the issue that we're talking about. I was also maybe adding the numbers at the beginning of your packet. If Coventry had the same amount of numbers that you have at the beginning at 4,619 and I think 1362 was the RFPL, if it stays the same, then you can tie this bill in that says if the numbers are the same, then the state aid is the same. But I would do, next couple of weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, take a look at this bill. It's 2008 S2397. Look the way the bill is set up. If that's going to be enough calculation of the formula in the legislation to suffice what we're targeting. But I would also target, if the numbers are the same, meaning the population, and I would put aside the medium incomes, because those numbers are kind of high, that maybe if this is something we can use to determine to at least give you some sort of, I could say, you won't have any odds of thinking what the numbers are going to be coming up in March, but if it determines what the local school aid is going to be the coming year at a base minimum, maybe that's something that you can work from.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I will take a look at that. Thank you.
okay, you're welcome.
Mr. Levis, a little tangential, but do you have a grasp on how many students have left the district for pathway programs in other districts versus how many have come? Is there a net loss, net gain, roughly?
Well, I don't know. We know that right now we have about, I'm going to give an estimate of about, for next year, we'll probably have about 34 students that are in terms of career tech. So there's different buckets, like there's career tech, and basically the way the commissioner and the Department of Ed, they look at school choice when it comes to career tech. And they're supposed to be looking at some legislation. So if we have a program that we offer, that the intent was students would go to those regional centers where they have the program, but that's not the way the Department of Ed. So it's like charter schools, that if students, family wants to send a child to charter school, they have a right to go to the charter school.
Yes.
So we have about 40, right now we have about, I think projected for next year, about 42.
Leaving or coming in?
Coming in.
How many do you have leaving?
And we have about, I think it's about, what did I say, 32, 33 right now that most of them are going to one program, but we have some in Warwick, we have a couple in Narragansett, we have a couple in Cranston.
So if I'm understanding, you're
have a
sending
net-
more Coventry native students out of your
No,
district?
we have more coming into our career tech than we
you
do going out to career
going out.
techs.
Okay.
However, that's career techs.
But,
Charter
okay, I'm
schools-
talking in general. No, forget not charters. I'm talking just other public schools. How many students are leaving the district versus how many are coming in for, again, the pathways and the other public school programs that allow them to voc tech, all of that?
I think we have a net, there's more students coming in than are leaving for career tech programs. So.
Does that, so that sets up the next question. Does that impact your budgeting in a negative way or a positive way? How does that help you to have more children coming in? Or
It would help us to have all students coming in and most of our students staying with us, right? That's the way we're set up with the regional. I mean, that's the goal, is that we want to have, and that's when we talked about during the budget process, we're not resting on our laurels, that we had one of these 7 regional career tech centers, and then, back in the day, students in those catchment areas all went to those regional tech. We know that it's a very competitive market. We know that parents want the best for their child. Sure. We know that we have to compete. So we're looking at that so that to make leaving Coventry a very, very difficult situation. Like some students go to Hendricken or LaSalle, but it's like a legacy. Their parents went there. We want to make it very, very difficult, and we know we have some work to do. So, but I think, we would like to draw in 100 students into our career tech and maybe have 20, 25 go out, That's our goal to
And would that ease your burden for budget?
Oh, definitely.
It
definitely.
would. Okay, so the money following the student has become a problem insofar as losing students.
Right. So, if I may just jump in, so most of the districts that we're paying tuition out to can range from 16 to 20,000 depending on the school.
Yeah.
Our per pupil is around that $16,000, but again, that takes into consideration fixed costs and whatnot. So if you lose one student, that per pupil is not going to change a lot. So when you start thinking, again, I'm picking on one particular system because it's new.
Yes.
Yes.
We're familiar.
Yes. So when you budget to have 11 students attending that school district and suddenly you find out that you have 23 going to the tune of $16,500 per student, that's a lot of money that's going out that we could use in our community.
And that's sort of where I was going, Sarah. And so
Right.
thank you for answering that succinctly, because I did see that as a potential problem. What would help alleviate that? And I'm not saying that you need to build up your programs, but with that aside, what would help in the budgeting process to alleviate the pain that schools? Because certainly Coventry is not the only system feeling the pain. Some are benefiting, some are losing, and the losers right now are hurting. So what would help? What could we do that would help?
I think working with RIDE in terms of the commissioner has met with individual superintendents. He's met with just the regional career tech center superintendents, and as much as he wants school choice, he's also agreed that he would work with us in terms of if we offer a program, then students in that area, in that school district, would have to attend that program, not go to another school for the same program.
Yep.
And he's willing to work with us on language, but that hasn't taken place.
Okay.
That would be something that
Would be helpful.
that would be helpful. And again, that doesn't preclude the fact that we have to put out high-quality programs. We constantly, and we know that, we talk about that constantly, and we're looking at our programs.
Thank you.
If I may just jump in real
Absolutely.
quick. So the theory at that other district was always build the castle and they will come. And that's what we used to say. And so I think if we want to start tuitioning students in, but even more importantly, stop our students from leaving, then that investment in our system is what has to take place. And it's not, unfortunately, those are new programs. So we do have a list of new career tech programs that we will be discussing with the school committee, but those come at a cost. You have to have textbooks to start that. You have to have the equipment to start that. You have to have the professional development to start that. So if we want to be in a position where we can tuition kids in and keep our kids here, then we have to have the programs that make them want to stay and come. And that's going to take an investment in resources to do so.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on number one? As far as we have tonight, I would like to acknowledge Representative Morgan. Welcome. Just arrived. So that's all but Representative Roberts that could not attend. That's 7 out of 8. Thank you for coming. Merry Christmas, Representative Roberts. Merry Christmas. Morgan, did I say? I meant Morgan. I know Roberts can't make it. Okay. Mrs. Yes, you're here.
Morgan's in the house.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, Mr. Leviston, I guess we moved on to number 2.
Yes. Number 2.
I'll let you go ahead with that
Sure.
one.
So this is This is recommendations of the Rhode Island School Building Task Force. I know both the House and Senate had representatives. And one of the things in Coventry that is quite apparent if you go into our schools is our schools, most of our buildings are old. And we haven't had the resources to maintain. We have, our capital budget is predominantly for technology. I got in trouble the other day for mentioning ceiling tiles, so I'm going to refrain from mentioning that we have $800,000 worth of ceiling tiles that need to be replaced. But that's just to really make a point. I've never been in a community where ceiling tiles weren't replaced when they needed to be replaced. We were really struggling. You know, we just mentioned before in the last, if we want people to be proud of the schools, I mean, we have incredible staff, I believe. We were talking earlier, we've made a lot of really good hires. I think our school's definitely moving in a very positive direction. We haven't, I need to hit some wood here because there's been just positives about education. There's a lot of negativity, and we've been in the news for positive. And, obviously that can shift, but there's a lot of good things going on. But our schools are falling apart. I mean, we've been dealing, just today, we dealt with issues with our heating system because they're old. We had coils burst in both Western Coventry, the steam pipes, they're just going. And when we patch something else, it goes another section. We have schools that were built in 1962, in the 70s. I think our newest school is Washington Oak, which was built in 2000? Okay. So this is something that the state's been working on. I know the General Treasurer, Commissioner of Education, I know the House and Senate. They want to make a major investment. We all talked about the Jacobs report that came out that said Coventry, just to get our infrastructure where it should be in terms of a high-quality, safe environment for our students, just with our current structures would be about somewhere between $72, $76 million. So this is an aggressive plan to go out in bonds in 2018, I think, for $250 million, and 2022 for another $250 million. I know, though, when I just mention even construction here, I get a lot of evil looks, and the bond seems to be a bad, word. But I'm looking for your thoughts as legislators around this whole process, what you feel. Like I said, we had about $100,000 in capital last year to use through impact fees, and we replaced a filtration system at Washington Oak, because if you went in and saw the bubblers or whatever, the water fountains, and I'm sorry, Western, they had trash bags over them. We were having water, and that had been in place. That problem had been in place for several years. So we used those funds to fix it. Anybody that goes to Hopkins Hill, you saw that sand dune issue that had been there for 20 some odd years. We didn't have any additional funds. We used money we didn't have to put a fence up with the help of Mr. McGee, thank you very much, in the Department of Public Works, and some private truckers to bring in some loam. We put a fence up and we're going to reseed it, but we have very little funds. So I just wanted your thought in terms of this process and where we are in terms of Coventry and what your support or recommendations would be for us as a school department, but also as a school community.
Yes, Representative Morgan first.
So I have a couple of questions. Do you know what your school match is from the state? So what part comes from the municipal taxpayers, state?
So I think the reimbursement rate for us is about 47%, but if it's a green project, there's an additional 4%, so it could be up to 51% reimbursement.
So about half comes from municipal taxpayers and half from
Correct.
the state. And I guess for the town council, how much do you have bonded? How many, what's your bonding position?
I defer to Mr. Waters, Mr. Tebow.
2 million bonded, townwide. Total, out of what, 60?
The school's general obligation and the town's general obligation, approximately 3 million.
So our current amount bonded right now is 3 million, according to our finance director.
In total? So I know you
so our
had
total,
some fairly large bond issues in the last few years. I just wonder, is that all paid off?
That number's not correct. How much?
Not in the schools, just for the town, because the bonding comes from the town.
So we have a total bonding capacity of approximately $63 million total.
And do you know how much is
of that
being used?
That's being utilized right now? I want to say probably, I want to say 11 or 12 million, and Bob can verify that. Okay.
He's going to go check?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just,
May I jump in real quick while he
Yes,
runs to check? So I just wanted to touch base regarding the reimbursement rate. In order for a school district to be eligible for the reimbursement rate, they have to complete the necessity for school construction application process, which came into effect around 2011. Coventry Schools has never completed that process. So as it stands right now, if we were to complete a project, we would not be eligible for that reimbursement. It's a 3-stage process. We did complete stage 1 and we're approved for that. Stage 2 is due February 1st. However, it is somewhat cost prohibitive for us to do that. In order to even get to that process, we have to hire an architect and an engineer to have them come through our entire school and assess the entire school, even if we only want to do improvements in one school. It's part of these regulations that came into place. We did go out to bid for an architect to do this feasibility study. All of their cost proposals are basically a % of cost, because not only do you have to have them come in and analyze your building facilities, but then they basically have to stay on through the entire project, which is a great idea if you're doing a major renovation or major school construction. You obviously want that oversight. But even for us to do regular maintenance upkeep, which would otherwise be housing age eligible, we would have to take on these additional costs. So that has been something we actually talked about the last school committee meeting, that we're grappling with the unanticipated out-of-district tuition costs that we're hit with this year. We had hoped to move forward with stage 2 and 3, but I'm having a hard time saying, yes, let's do that, because as of right now, I don't think that we have the funds in the FY18 budget to do that. So what that means is if we were to take on a project immediately, we would not get that 50% reimbursement until we complete that stage 3 process.
what's the stage 3?
I'm sorry, the three-stage process for the necessity for school construction application process.
Nice to know. Thank you. Let's see what we can do about that.
May I add a comment, please? Saturday, Chairperson Patno and I attended a training program for school committee members, and it was specifically on the recommendations of the Rhode Island School Building Task Force. And the presenter was Ira Magaziner, treasurer for the state of... Excuse me, I think about his father. Forgive me, don't tell him. Mr. Magaziner, treasurer for the state of Rhode Island, and he specifically asked us to speak to our legislators and ask them to help support a bond issue being put on the ballot in 2018 to support school construction and school improvements. And so I'm asking you to consider that. I won't go into all the details that he presented, but he did present many attractive features that they are building into the program that would make it very attractive for us if we could find the money to even do the preliminary studies that we need to do. But it would be a good bond issue for all of the children in the entire state. So I would ask you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any update on
Yeah,
information?
Bob's going to get it, but I'd like to note that one of the items that the league is pushing for is the school aid funding, and as a result of the task force, they've determined that there's bringing all their schools up to good condition. I'm not sure exactly what the $2 billion consists of, but that's a number that was put out there.
Okay. Any other comments on, yes, Representative Nunes?
Thank you. I just want to, I guess, be clear on this. What your proposal is right now, or what you're asking for legislative support on, is a referendum for $250 million in 18 and $250 million in 20 or 22?
22.
that's the recommendation from the task force. So, and if that is to go forward, the point here is that if we're to go forward, for 18, as Sarah said, that we have a lot of work to do. We have to, decide, is this community going to support that? But as legislators for this community, as I was asking before, with the state is indicating that Coventry needs to contribute more to education, and the state share is going to went from 48.7% to 45.9%. So, just would like to know where you stand on this in terms of your support. Are you going to support this legislation? Where do you stand on this? And maybe you haven't had conversations around the or around the proposal.
$500 million is a little bit to digest, so it's something that, we probably need to think about a little bit.
Sure.
I would certainly be willing to maybe, look into some type of modification to the feasibility study, so at least we can look at this, intelligently and figure out what exactly you need to spend on what schools you need to spend them on, and maybe $250 million is enough, or maybe $500 million isn't enough. So it's definitely something we should look at.
And this is for the state. This isn't for Coventry.
But how much is for Coventry? That's the question. How much of that 250 million?
We don't know what the share will be.
So the state did the report. Remember the Jacobs report? They went into every school district. They hired the Jacobs firm, and they came out for Coventry, and I shared that with the town council when it came out. And then it was a draft version and finalized it. And for us, it was approximately $76 million, right? But now there were some points where they were going to allow us to use that report as part of the feasibility study, but now they're not allowing. We can use it as some guidance, but now we have to go back out, even though the state spent, many, many millions of dollars to do that report. So I think that's where the $2 billion comes from, though, that the entire Jacobs report, when it looked at the school, because they walked every single school in the state. And I think that's where that number that Mr. Waters was referring to. So the proposed bond the bond that they're proposing is for the state in two phases, two bonds of $250 million. So again, my question was, is that something that you support? We have a lot of work to do on our end, and that feasibility study right now is almost prohibitive because just because of where we are financially in Coventry for FY18. So for us to invest potentially $50,000 is a lot of money to invest just to get to the starting line.
Understood.
So, Mr. Levis, from the moment that bond proposal came as a suggestion from the panel, my instinct is to be opposed to it, and I'll tell you why. And that may not be favorable, and maybe not be what people want to hear, but we've seen some stuff go through the legislature this year that has basically been bailout Providence legislation, from the sale of the reservoir properties, et cetera, et cetera. Providence is in deep trouble. You mentioned ceiling tiles. We can all sit here and we can understand the degradation to the quality of the schools and how that's happened, but you can't hold a candle to Providence that has lead paint chips big enough for a family to eat hanging off the wall, and lead pipes exposed, and wires and everything else. I would imagine, were this to be bonded, you'd see very little, if any, and what you saw would be insufficient, and you would find yourselves having to go out to the people of Coventry to bond the balance of maybe what was even promised to you. I don't see this as very good. I see this punishing towns that have been fiscally responsible and have maintained their schools very well, yet schools like systems like Providence that refuse to even fund their pensions fully are going to get the full benefit. I don't think this is a good deal for the taxpayers whatsoever on a macro level. That's my position today. As we learn more, and you asked for our positions, that is my position. When we learn more, if that changes, I'll be happy to let the folks in Coventry know. But as it stands, there's no way I can support a $500 million bond referendum. That's basically a bailout Providence bond. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Representative Morgan.
I agree with my colleague. Representative Chippendale, but they're asking for 250 million over 5 years, which is really 50 million a year. You need 35 of that in the next 5 years. So you're not getting half of what, right? It's just, have you gone through and prioritized your projects to want, health, safety of the children? I honestly believe that children and teachers deserve to be in healthy schools. But have you prioritized it? Because what you're talking about is $500 million over 10 years, and Coventry will get a tiny bit of that.
So we have no plans for major construction. So we put forward a capital plan with Mr. Waters as part of our budget last year. I think we did 5 years, approximately 800,000. We're looking just to take what we have, and make those environments optimum learning environments. We're talking about schools, like I said, that were built in 1962 that were designed for learning in 1962. We're talking about, and things that aren't even reimbursable, we're talking about like cafeteria tables. We have cafeteria tables in the high school that are original, that are dangerous. They're just dangerous. We had somebody hit in the head when they were moving them because the latch didn't work and received a concussion. We're talking about a lot of basic improvements. If we were to go out to look at building a new school, which we're not, we'd have to have, like with elementary, do a reconfiguration team and look at that for 2 or 3 years, and what does this community want? We're not looking. We're looking to do projects that are probably under $500,000. At some point, maybe do a bond for our high school, because our high school is our flagship, and parts of it have been renovated, other parts of it are obsolete.
Well, and
so
I guess
those
that's
are
what
things
I'm
we're
asking.
looking at.
Have you prioritized
Yes.
those projects so that we know
Right.
every year what you want to do?
We just
You
started.
can't do them all
right.
at once.
We started doing that last year, and we had lists, but it was kind of the mindset was, well, we're not going to get the money, so why go forward? And I think we have to go forward. We have to let the community. I'm definitely not doom and gloom. I believe there's a possibility thinking we're going to figure this out collectively. But last year we did. We sat with the town. We honestly looked at our list. We took it off some of the Jacobs report, and we prioritized. And we put $800,000 for the next 5 years. And we could do that moving out every single year. And capital wasn't, I don't believe any capital was funded by the town. But year after year after year after year, and we have buildings where we've had 12 custodians and maintenance staff cut over the last 10 years. We can't even maintain what we have. And we want to guarantee when people come in, I'd much rather have, yes, our schools are old, but they're spotless. And we can't commit to that. We work hard. So we have to just be honest about where we're at. So, and I don't disagree with probably the urban areas getting most of this money. But I think this has to be brought out to the public and say, look at what we have. And if the community decides that the condition of our schools and our municipal buildings, I'm so happy they just replaced the carpet over there. The community owns these. Look at here. This is a public building. If this is okay, then so be it. The public has spoken, So for us, though, we need to do something drastic. Like I mentioned, just the heating systems. Our heating systems are going to explode. We had to do an emergency repair for a pump house at Washington Oak. We are doing it because we had pinholes in our pump house. It's like a mile away that pushes the water to Washington Oak. And so we have a repair. It was $30,000, which we didn't budget, just to fabricate a portion of the pipes. And that's going to be replaced. They have to drain the whole system. And then we found out on top of that, if we turn that system on, it's all PVC piping going up. The Kent County Water said, you're going to blow all those pipes, and then you're out of luck. So we had to now go out and get a pressure release, a company to come in that'll put some pressure release. We're just reacting to situations, and we do it low-key. We go before the committee, we let them know, but we're not doom and gloom. But at some point, our schools aren't going to be inhabitable. I look at like Hopkins Hill, which is an incredible school with an incredible school community, but it's old, and it's to the point where we're not going to be able to maintain it to the standards we need to at some point. So we're this is, this community, we're in a tough situation. So on the surface, this is very positive because at least it's getting, under the spotlight in terms of the conditions of schools, just like the conditions of bridges. We know that, conditions of roads. But, so for me, it's really interesting to see where do you stand on this? And I appreciate your honesty and I don't disagree with that. But if that's the case, then what do we do? What do we do?
Do you have a list of the projects?
I don't have it on me, but I can definitely, I have it,
Can you get
yeah.
them?
Sure.
So you think it's $800,000 a year is what you need?
This
or-
is just what we put out there. We have a lot, we could prioritize, well over $1 million a year. We could, because there hasn't been an investment in capital in, I don't know how many years. I don't know what the last, I know they did a bond for roofs, they did a bond for boilers.
Mhm.
But if you go into our schools, we have furniture, nobody has individual desks anymore. There are tables, it's about collaborative learning. We have rows and rows and rows and rows of desks in our schools. We had a school, Hopkins Hill, that took desks from Smithfield that were 1980s desks, and they were an upgrade. And when Hopkins Hill, Old County Road School in Smithfield, the only reason I know it because I was there and I had worked with Kathy Tankrell, the principal, they took many classrooms worth of furniture because it was an upgrade from what they had. And that was 1980, and that wasn't that long ago. Kathy's been here like 5 or 6 years. And again, this isn't doom and gloom. We just have to do something about that. So, our list was sitting with Mr. Waters and saying what's realistic, and we put in, $800,000, but when you haven't received any money for capital other than technology, $800,000 is like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? So, and we know you just don't go from from 0 to 60. We know we have to work with the community and work with the state on some type of plan, but the key word in that is a plan. There has to be a plan. No longer can we just say, well, we're not going to get the money, so why bring it forward? We just can't do that anymore.
Okay.
I was just going to say,
final.
Lastly, I think also the extension should go to the federal delegation also to ask them what is the plans in Washington for any federal money coming back to the states. If you will recall, those schools in Coventry from 1957 to 1963, I believe all the elementary schools, Black Rock, Hopkins Hill, Tioga, were all built with some federal money, starting in 57 all the way to 63. So it wasn't just the town or the state that built the elementary schools that we have today in the high school. Today, if we were to rebuild every single school in Coventry, it would cost about $250 million.
More than that.
$250 million for every single school to be replaced. But again, I think the feds also should have some responsibility. You had the president talk today on television about rebuilding bridges, roads. We spent over $7 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think the ball should also shift toward our federal delegation and ask them, what are they going to do for Rhode Island as far as federal money coming in to help for this situation of replacing and reconstructing some of our schools?
Okay, I know we have to move along because a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of concerns, but Mr. McGee, did you have one final comment before we go to number 3?
Just a quick thing, maybe the state delegation could look into, why would they not, after spending all that money on a Jacobs report, why would they not allow the school department to use that report as part of their application to accept, to get into the 50% reimbursement? The state spent millions on it, and it's kind of seems foolish that we're not able to use that report.
We could have a discussion about it.
All righty. Mr. Waters, number 3 then, and we'll move right down on the agenda. We have a list review and discussion for the League of Cities and Towns. Their comments, legislative priorities that we've been given a copy of, but some of the topics might be nice to be mentioned.
Right, so the memo I passed out to the town council, this is still a draft form. You do not, because it's still a draft form for the league. It's some of the things that they'll be pushing for, but this is more of just want you to keep an eye out for legislation and what the league is doing this year. Speaking for the league has really ramped up its lobbying anticipation efforts this year. They brought on a lobbying firm to assist municipalities and pushing a couple of these platforms. Their number one priority for FY19 in the 2018 legislative session is to addressing the school construction renovation and the school aid funding. With the end of the funding formula, they're looking at how this will impact all the communities, as well as how the legislators can help develop principles and policies on school construction, again, regarding local contributions, maintenance of efforts requirements, and changes to financing. Going forward, there was a bill, I believe, was introduced late in the session on collective bargaining. I believe the mayor of forgive me, it's north of Cranston. Johnson? Yes.
Johnson.
Thank you. Was pushing for legislation that would allow neutral third-party arbitrators who are would be Rhode Island judges or magistrates. That's something that the league supports. We often hear of other municipalities that have out-of-state arbitrators help decide arbitration cases, and they have no idea what's happening in Rhode Island. So to have retired judges and magistrates arbitrate cases, labor cases in the state, that would be very beneficial, both for the labor unions and for the towns, because they have a better sense of what's going on in the state of Rhode Island versus an arbitrator that comes in from Maine. Again, one of the things that is going to be huge for Coventry, as well as other municipalities, is the state aid to municipalities, especially with the phase out of the car tax, and just ensuring that make-up portion that the state has committed to continues, especially with the deficit of over $250 million. That's something that the league and all the municipalities around the state are looking at. So we want you all to keep your eyes out for that and make sure that the car tax make-up continues. There is an increase expected in the tipping fees for the upcoming fiscal year, going from $39.50 to $47 per ton. That's something that we're concerned about. It was noted last year that the state came in and was about to take the revenues from the resource recovery and help make up the rest of the state budget, or help make up some of the deficit of the state budget. I believe at the last minute they were able to hold on to the surplus and resource and recovery and help the municipalities not increase the tipping fees as much. But that's something that happened last year that you should be aware of and keep an eye out for, that they might try to scoop away that revenue again from resource recovery. And there's a bunch of other smaller items that the league will be pushing, but please keep an eye out for league members of the legislative committee. They'll be up on the Hill this session and pushing for league items. That's about all I had to say for as far as the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, and a couple of big items that they'll be pushing the upcoming legislative session.
Okay, it'll be a interesting General Assembly session, as usually, but...
And the league will be finalizing its legislative points coming up further along in January, and they'll be putting out a final position paper for those items.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Waters.
One quick, will you make sure, I don't know if the state has access to that, but would you make sure that the state, all our delegates get a copy of that with the league's recommendations final?
If you haven't had an opportunity to meet our new executive at the league, Brian Daniels, he's been around the state scene for a while. He's hired last year by the league and is really helping the league turn around its efforts to lobby the state.
Okay, next on the agenda was a matter of interest to myself. that I wanted to discuss with our legislative representatives, and I know it's been being talked about up at the State House now for a year or two, and in that Massachusetts is really on their way, I guess, but the legalizing of marijuana, I'm just getting buried with news articles. One of the most recent ones was coming out of California, entitled "Legalization of Marijuana for Adults Poses Problems for People Dealing with Teens." And it mentions many educators, even people from working with boys clubs and girls clubs, that if in fact it becomes legalized, and hopefully it doesn't in Rhode Island. I know there's 8 states where it has, and Massachusetts is a golf ball shot away. There's going to be a lot of issues, lots of issues. One of the biggest issues is if you end up, as a state, Massachusetts, allowing marijuana to be bought in shops, in restaurants, etc., single servings. How do you convince your teenagers that it's not good for them and it's dangerous to use, when in fact their parents possibly will be bringing it home, as in some of the concerns in Massachusetts. They're backing pot sales at various businesses, yoga studios, movie theaters, restaurants, massage parlors, bars. I mean, it's just, I can't believe what I'm reading, when it's still against federal law, the bottom line. Another article out of Boston, basically today's paper, December 18th. They have social consumption as an issue, how the pot shops will work. They'll have a primary use license, and then they'll have a secondary category type license. They mention home delivery may be available under strict sets, where you can order the legal or the marijuana to come to your home and be delivered. They have craft cooperatives where you could set up a small business and do your own craft. May 10th, we have dangers of legalizing marijuana, and I think probably most of the state reps have heard from Nancy Denuncio of Narragansett talking about all of the dangers. And I know it's going to probably fall to the General Assembly in one way or the other coming up. I guess one of the interesting ones was Sunday, May 21st, where in the Sunday business section, the entitlement was weed or work. All right? So in other words, you want to legalize marijuana, don't consider ever getting employed. Not federally, whether it's military, not working for electric boat, certainly not working for law enforcement. I don't know who's going to want to hire you if it becomes legalized and it's in your system. So I mean, hello Rhode Island, and again, I guess being in law enforcement for 30-something years and seeing the problems and knowing that there is no checkpoint on consumption where you have breathalyzers for alcohol and how much weed is okay, even though they only might sell an ounce, and how does that affect driving? And they say accidents are up, problems are up, et cetera, and that's just going to happen in Massachusetts. And then how do we draw the border wall, and what's going to happen with Rhode Island? And again, federally against the law. And I don't want to even go into medical marijuana, where doctors, for every doctor that says, oh, it helps, it's controls pain. Well, there's other ways to control pain. And there's another doctor says, no, it hasn't been proven. There is no benefit from medical marijuana. My daughter's in the Navy. She has military coming back with all kinds of wounds, mental problems. You don't want to mask the problem by covering it up. It only makes it worse. That's just my 2 cents, because I depend on the 8 representatives to go up there and sound off, because this is not good. And if you want copies of these articles, I'm sure you've been given telephone books the last couple of years, but I know there's one senator up there from Cranston that just and one representative I know, and I've seen it over the years, and they just won't stop pushing until maybe Rhode Island becomes like Massachusetts, and we become state 9, and boy, my kids are pretty well grown, they're pretty intelligent, but I've got 6 grandkids. How do you explain to them it's not good, don't use it, when it says, oh, it's okay for parents? Then they got the billboard signs that are going to appear everywhere. Massachusetts, smoke, light up. And then I read in Worcester, where I went to high school in Holden, in Worcester, in the paper today, they had a 100-foot rolled up marijuana joint. And they're all standing around taking pictures. And when are you going to light up, I guess is one of the comments. What? What? Okay, I guess I've nailed this enough, but I just wanted to hopefully send the word. I am one council person that's not. We've done some ordinance work here in Coventry. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. There's other ways to take yourself out or to ruin our kids. There's a lot of other ways. Look at the problems Rhode Island has. We lead in almost all the bad things. That's it.
Mr. President, if I may, might echo some of your sentiments real quickly. I am against recreational use marijuana. I am for medical marijuana, but I am against it. I don't think Coventry needs to have. If it gets to the point where we can have home delivery marijuana, that's pretty bad. I mean, I don't think it's a good thing for the town, and I hope the state delegation. I work in a field where I get drug tested quite frequently,
right.
And federal law supersedes any state law, and we're going to have many more people going on the state welfare system because they want rather smoke marijuana than they would go out and work, because whether it's medical use or whatever, we're going to have a real situation. I don't think it's good for Coventry, and I really hope you guys would consider fighting against that.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. McGee, because anybody that operates equipment, any type of engine, any type of job that they may want, that's gone. That's gone. It's not a good thing. Representative Nardolillo.
So just to piggyback on what you said about the probability of passage, in the past 2 terms that I've been up there, I've seen the evolution of legislation for passage.
I know you fought it.
And it's continued to grow and grow, and as states have jumped on board for sales of marijuana recreationally, the surrounding states, and Connecticut is in consideration too. Us smack dab in the middle is very frustrating, and it's concerning for a person who is an advocate against recreational marijuana. I don't see any good for the communities in the state. I think it's being looked at from a fiscal aspect of it, being a parent, and also being part of a community where there are children. My main concern is for our youth and the potential. The Attorney General's office has communicated, I've communicated with them on research that they've been doing in continuation to this process, to the other states, the concerns, things that you're reading in the paper and that we see everywhere. I am opposed to it, and I always will be. So that's something that I'd like to put out there on the aspects of medical marijuana. I have sat with individuals who have medical concerns, and they don't respond positively to prescription medication. It actually does them more harm, and they refuse to take it. They have been prescribed medical marijuana, and it subsides a lot of their issues and concerns. I've met with parents who have children who have seizures, and it does work for them. So being a supporter of the medical aspect of it, I always will be. Recreational, I will not be.
Okay, any other one want to make a comment regarding the topic? Mr. Representative Chippendale.
Thank you. I'm going to just infer from your comments that you're against.
Yes.
And with, for or against aside, that horse has been duly beaten and is quite dead. if I had to make a guess from what happened this last session, it looked like there was some traction in sidebar conversations. It appeared like maybe there was some language that would be compromised and would be acceptable. I'm speaking from my perspective, my opinion. No one else is in this audience here from the legislature. Because it went to a committee, because the issue became a study commission to study something that's already been studied and not study the issue at hand, what would the impact be on Rhode Island, business-wise, health-wise, et cetera. They're studying something completely different. Seemed to me like it was sent off in the corner to die. I'm not going to tell you to take that to the bank, because I can't promise that that's what happened, but it sure looks like it, and it sure smells like it, and it sure quacks like it. I mean, I think I used about 4 different expressions in there, but you know what I'm saying. It looks like it's been shelved for a while. How long? I don't know. I think the prudent approach is wait for Massachusetts to blunder. Let them make all the mistakes before. Let them go through all of the pain and all of the hassle. Probably that's the approach that we're seeing here. Whether or not that ever comes into fruition in Rhode Island, I don't know. But I certainly wouldn't say it's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years.
My concern is,
And I thank you.
my concern is that while I agree with my colleague, last year was the most aggressive I've ever seen with the fact that they polled every city and town. And the reason I surmise from that is to put pressure on the senators and to put pressure on the representatives, saying these individuals are echoing that they want legalization in our state, and you need to respond. You need to respond to what they're saying. I've talked to many individuals in our town, and the way the questions could be phrased, we don't have certainty, but there is the very concern of the fact that there are strong potentials and negativity to this. They're looking at it from the potential of a fiscal aspect, which there's an abundance of revenue that the calculations are off in Colorado and other states that they're pushing. So it's concerning because there was a tremendous lobby for this, and I saw it most certainly last year where the pressure was put on the representatives, cities and towns, the senators, by giving the percentage of polling. And it is concerning. So while most things go to a study commission to go to sleep, let's say, for a while, Massachusetts is definitely going to be a responsive thing. And we don't know where the governor stands on this, on many different things, but most certainly on the medical aspect, she vocalized her opinion. But on the recreational aspect of it, I think that she's going to wait to see what the neighboring states do. I think that the information that came out last term is going to be something that she's going to work with. I just think that it's important that we really look at this and look at the negative impacts of this.
Well, I thank you for your comments. I don't want to, again, dwell on the issue. I just know that they have their system down. They know how to politic. They know how to bring in all the horses. They know how to put the pressure on. And it's up to the people up there representing us to stand strong and do the right thing. And if home deliveries of recreational marijuana going in and having one serving and think you can't leave with it, and all these possible that is actually being designed right now in Massachusetts. They have till I think it's March to come up with their final recommendations, and then July 1 it starts. If I'm not mistaken, or at least if the newspapers aren't mistaken. So that's a concern, because
President?
July will be here soon.
Rhode Island.
Mr. President?
Well, we have Senator Riptakis for
Yeah, I just want to hear from Senator Riptakis and
Rhode
Senator
Island,
Kettle on this issue, because Senator Miller is the one who's sponsoring,
The
pushing
commission
this.
has met 3 times already, and they're supposed to be issuing their report at the end of March. That's their report. They have to by state law.
Massachusetts.
No, Rhode Island.
I
Rhode Island.
Massachusetts.
Rhode Island, the commission has met 3 times already, and they're going to meet again probably in January,
All right.
February. They're coming out with their report at the end of March. That's the commission here in
Okay.
Rhode Island. Whatever happens from that report, we're going to read it. I doubt very much there's going to be even enough time even to put something together, but I'm opposed to recreational marijuana, and I think I'm speaking for myself, and I think if you poll the delegation, but it's going to be interesting what that report's going to say. What Representative DeLille said, we're reading a lot of reports from Colorado. The news was great at the beginning, but now there's a lot of problems in Colorado. It's not the money that's being generated, but it's what the effects are.
I've read
to the
that too.
public. So-
And the accidents and the problems enforcing it, and nothing but headaches. And I don't know if that is going to be heavily publicized here by the marijuana proponents, all the problems. They're not going to say that. They're not going to bring that to the General Assembly. So, all right, again, my one interest with the General Assembly representatives, and I know, again, there's two sides to the medical marijuana. I only listen to some doctors I personally are related to, and it's not a good thing. My daughter, the psychiatrist, it's not a good thing, all right? And she's well-respected nationally, military and everything else, on the phone today with individuals I can't mention, but anyhow. Senator Kettle, tell us what you think, sir.
Well, Mr. President, well, Senator, I think we had a couple of go-arounds at the State House when you and I were there together about this issue.
We did.
And I've actually have co-sponsored legalization in the past, and I've been open to it. For a personal liberty standpoint, I don't really think the government should be telling people what they can and cannot do with their bodies. However, looking at what's happened in Colorado, Massachusetts, I've been kind of more hesitant. Maybe I've grown wiser as I've gotten older. I don't know yet, but that remains to be seen. But I'm a little more neutral on it right now, and
Senator,
more hesitant.
I'll take that. I'll take that, Senator. Thank you.
So we'll see. You haven't fully brought me around yet, Mr. President, but maybe I'm getting there. We'll see.
Well, thank you. I think we're going on to the next one.
Mr.
I'm sorry, Representative Serpaugh.
I just want to add my 2 cents, if I may.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Regarding the pressure that was put on us last year, I represent West Warwick, and Coventry, and you people know what robo emails are. I received a grand total of 8 in
Really?
favor of.
Really?
8.
That's good.
So that makes me wonder if people are, and they sign their name and address, and I looked them up on my voter list, and they really do exist. So that makes me wonder if there really isn't the pressing want for it, or people just are ashamed to sign their name and address to a robo email. I received 8.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you for your comments. Thank you for hearing me out. Number 5, Councilman Kerry McGee.
Yes, this has been brought up just about every year that I've been on the council trying to get this passed, as far as classifying our manufactured home neighborhoods as affordable housing. I know it's been knocked down every time, and I think Mr. Asselone had spoke something about the Rhode Island RIMFAC has to be involved in it somehow. I don't know what it's going to take to make it. It would be so good for the town of Coventry if we could get our manufactured homes so we can meet our 10% quota. Like I said, we tried every year. What will it take for us to, can we get the banks involved? It's been shot down every year, and I just want to keep trying because it would really solve a lot of our issues.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. President?
Yes, certainly.
Mr. McGee, this is certainly something that I am 100% behind. We've been doing this in Gloucester for several years for the same reason that you all want to do it in Coventry. It makes sense. We have we have a couple of mobile home parks. We have a lot of folks who have those pre-manufactured homes, and they are, by all measures, affordable housing. We want them to be included in the state's cap, or goal. It's not a cap, their goal, so that we can meet the affordable housing standards, and we have encountered those problems every year. We get closer and closer, but whether it's the bank or this regulation, we're pushing forward. There has been more traction over the years. People are realizing, even folks in districts that are doing very, very well with their affordable housing goals, are realizing it's not as easy to hit that percentage, especially when you look at places that don't have infrastructure. Western Coventry, the western portion of the state where there's no sewers, there's no bus lines, there's things like that. That's been the driving force for us to get those houses, the mobile homes, included as affordable housing. Certainly we'll continue to do that. Anything the town can offer will be helpful. Okay. And I think, I'm guessing, but I think Rep. Morgan has a question.
Representative Morgan, I think, is
right,
wanting
thank
a
you.
comment.
Representative Roberts actually put in a bill last year which we specifically mentioned trailer parks and mobile homes. I want to make that clear to everybody that this is not making them Section 8 housing. It's just saying they're inexpensive housing, right there. So this year we talked about it because that didn't move last year. This year we're actually going to use a formula. So right now there is an affordable housing formula, and we want to actually extend that to any home, whether government money touches it or not. Because right now, for the folks that are in the audience, to be counted as an affordable housing unit, it has to have government money attached to it in some way. So in other words, state dollars have to be spent or federal dollars have to be spent, has to be Section 8. So we want to take that away from it, that it doesn't have to have government money attached to it. It just has to be inexpensive. And that means below a certain percentage of the median price. So we're going to go with a formula this year and see if we can bust through that. Because I know in West Warwick, we barely make the cap, and I think everybody knows we have a lot of inexpensive housing in West Warwick. So we want to change that.
Can I just add something else? There
Certainly.
absolutely is nothing meant derogatory. I mean, to the people who own mobile homes. They're beautiful homes.
I know, they're nice.
They're just an affordable home, and that's why, I mean, some people take offense to it, and that's not what it's meant for. It's just an important thing for the town to have us meet our caps. So.
Senator Kettle is next, and then Councilwoman Carlson.
Yes, I think this is absolutely important issue, something that Senator Fogarty has sponsored, Senator Morgan has sponsored, and I've co-sponsored to try and, because this impacts western Rhode Island, because you look at Situate, there's only so much land that Situate can build on because of the reservoir. So to meet the 10% for them is impossible. Obviously, Western Coventry lacks the infrastructure that is needed, as Rep. Chippendale alluded to. So obviously, this is something that we're trying to push for in the Senate. I've served on the Housing and Municipal Government Committee, which has heard this legislation numerous times. And again, Rhode Island Housing, RIMFAC have come in and have unfortunately killed it because it doesn't meet their standards. So we need to try and find a way to kind of work through that, because it would be tremendous for the town of Coventry and Western Rhode Island. So I think we need to keep pushing.
Can I add just one other thing? It's important for taxpayers, because whenever there's an affordable housing unit, the taxpayers that are not in affordable housing are actually subsidizing that through the tax rate, because affordable housing tax rate is 8%, and so other taxpayers pay much more in taxes, so they're actually subsidizing those homes. We just think that's unfair. And you're right, I think some of the mobile homes are beautiful inside. Some of them actually have fireplaces and everything. So it's not about them being trailer parks. It is about them being less expensive. That's all.
Councilwoman Carlson, and then Councilman LaBossigna.
Hi, good evening. Didn't get a chance to say welcome to everybody, but as usual, great to see everybody here. This has been something that's come up several times since I've been on council, and obviously it doesn't seem to always go anywhere. But, you know, I think we need an explanation. What's the benefit? I mean, yes, we would meet our 10%, but then once we meet our 10%, what's the benefit to the town? And also, I think when you've got to consider the other side of the coin for people who live in places like Wood Estates, and they have beautiful homes and beautiful property, and everybody takes care of it. You know, you've got to figure that, say, I don't know, a double home would go for $80,000. Well, anybody that's on affordable low mod would have to probably, there's a cap, correct? As to what because that has to be 30% of their income goes towards their housing. And I think it's 30%, right, Nancy? Okay, so they then would have to lower or devalue the cost of those homes to meet that cap. Well, you've lost tax revenue because your homes are not as affordable as they were. The people selling them can't sell them because they're not going to get the value that they want, you know, that they should be getting, because your valuation is probably higher. Who's going to monitor these people that are buying the homes that are low mod, because you can't just, they don't just walk in and say, I'm going to put a bid on it. They have to meet all this criteria for percentage of income and everything else, correct? So who monitors that? Does that go to the Coventry Housing Authority to monitor it? Does the state have some mechanism to vet the incomes and the finances? I'm not saying, you've got to look at both sides, I think, the pros and the cons, and I've heard about this for years, and it, as Carrie says, it doesn't go anywhere. Out in Western, it's probably not going to happen because we don't really have manufactured home parks. But on the other hand, I think we need to look at everything before we jump in and say the legislators have to do something with this, And I know we have a 10%, we're what, at 6 maybe? 6% of that, something like that. And, I go to planning meetings and the developers come in and they say, like Crompton Meadows, we're going to make it 25% low mod. Well, then after a while, that goes down to 7%, which is what happened the last time they came to planning. It went down to 7%. So I know it's getting harder and harder to meet that 10%, but I think we need to look at the bigger picture here and consider the people who are in their homes and what it might do to them before we change everything.
The biggest problem with it too, Karen, is that when it does appear in front of, the zoning and planning, is it gets fast-tracked. Anytime that any developer is going to come in and wants to put a certain percent of low mod, affordable housing, our standards and our rules don't apply. I mean, they get just about do anything they want because it has, and I want to stop that. I want to keep our zoning and our planning, if we had the mobile homes that were, considered, that would allow us to keep following our zoning regulations.
Well, of course, the developers can go to SHAB, and that'll make a difference. They can go to SHAB, the State Housing Authority Board, and then they could appeal and all the other things that go on. And another thing is, I think it's all well and good that, I don't know, is the advantage because we get federal funds if we meet that cap?
It's mandated by HUD.
Okay, so HUD, which we know is feds, then we have to think about, and Mike knows this because we went to meetings for it with the Roadmap Rhode Island, one of my favorite topics. Thanks, Nick. So then you're caught in that Roadmap Rhode Island fiasco, and is that still?
Yeah, that's the governing policy that's compelling towns to try to meet that 10%. That is it, the state guide plan.
I just wanted to correct you. When we put in, this year, we're going to put in a formula. It's not just for mobile homes. It would be for any inexpensive home. So in Providence, for instance, they have triple deckers that are privately owned. There's no government money attached to them, but they would be inexpensive to rent. They could be counted.
What's considered inexpensive, Pat?
It would be by a formula, and I don't have a formula with me.
Not in place
It's where you take the median price and then you say it's 30% of the median price or the median rent or something. So what would you have to give from, if you made a certain amount of income, what is 30% of it?
Yeah.
And would that 30% cover the rent in that particular structure? But it could be apartments, it could be homes, as long as that formula matches what it would cost for you to pay to live there.
Okay,
Well, there's a formula now, so you're talking about a new formula?
It doesn't have to be, all I want to say, it doesn't have to be trailer parks, it doesn't have to be mobile homes.
No, but I think that's what Carrie was
It could
specifically
be,
targeting.
triple-decker apartments. It could be anything where a person could go and rent it for less than the median price.
But they can do that now.
But it's not counted now. Those are not counted now, unless
Oh, I
there's
see what you're
government
saying.
money attached to them.
LaBoissoniere.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, this has been going on for a long time, and from way back in 2003 and 2004, when Mr. Spearman and I were on the council together. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we had done was to help the people at one of the parks become owners, because that was what was required, that they needed to be an owner at that particular time. We made that happen, and somehow they changed the rule, and now they didn't allow the people who became the owners of the park to be included in that affordable housing. So, and again, what happens is the planning as we know, planning department has always been inundated by developers who can get density requirements subverted, and again, fast-tracked. So that's the idea of getting us to 10%, to help alleviate some of the, things. And in a community like Coventry, where we have so much developable area, that's part of some of the battle. So we think we thought it was important back in 2003 and 2004. We still think it's important, and it's been going on a long time. So that's my story. And I'm sticking to it.
Okay. Unless there's any other comments on number 5, why don't we go to number 6? Councilmember Karen Carlson's topic.
All right, it's not quite what I had asked about at the meeting last week, because this says discussion on legislation that pertains to 44-7-10 allowing Coventry to deny building and demolition permits to those that are behind on their taxes, liens, and assessments. And really what my issue was, we have some businesses in town that have a history of not paying their taxes, and then they want their licenses renewed. And that's actually what I was talking about, was not the building permits part of this. My issue was some of our businesses that might need a victualling or a liquor license, and they're habitual late payers or non-payers.
Okay.
So that was my point.
Does that figure with the legislators here?
Well, I think that would be more appropriate for the learned Mr. Gorham to answer that one.
And I think, can't we do that on a town level?
I think that's
Right.
I
already.
don't know why we have to do this on a state
We
level.
don't. We don't.
It's already done on a townwide, because
Yeah.
you already have the power to deny any business their licenses, and then you also have the state as a backup to make sure that businesses do pay their sales tax, their liquor license, their health department tax, division taxation. And when that letter of good standing comes to the town, then you issue the license. So I think the Exeter law that you're stating here is a lot different. I think it's pertaining to what you said before, Councilwoman Carlson, about building permits. I think in Exeter it's a little bit different. That's why they carved that section out, 44-7-10.1, pertaining just to Exeter.
Yeah.
But I think you have the safeguards already in the community.
I think so too. I'm not sure why this,
Well, this agenda item that's before you has been something that's been advocated for in the past by our tax collector's office. And Sheriff, if you'd like to, our tax collector is here tonight, Monique. I don't know if you want to speak to these two items. They're really small changes for tacking the town of Coventry onto existing legislation that applies to Exeter and Gloucester.
Yeah, I would just like to add Coventry to 44-7-10-1, mainly because there are businesses in the town that don't necessarily have to get licenses, and they're the ones that are not paying. And I would like the opportunity to make all businesses apply for some kind of license, whether it be just for $5 or even free, but not being allowed to even have a business in Coventry unless they're current. We have businesses like Salon Galleria, Gutter Gods, D. Gorman Landscaping, Coventry Building and Wrecking, Allen Excavation that owe us thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I have judgments against a few of them, still can't collect the money. They can still do business in Coventry. We have no recourse. And I just want to get our name on this so that maybe we can have some recourse because it's within the law.
Okay.
that one I agree with. I wasn't talking about the permits.
Right.
I'm on her side.
So I have a
And then
question.
as far as like the demolition permits, I would like that because of mobile homes. They don't pay their taxes. They let the mobile homes, some of the mobile homes basically go to crap. They end up getting demolished. A new one gets put on. I lose all that tax money.
Senator Kettle.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the town of Exeter, do they create a whole bunch of new licenses for this, or are they just for licenses that come before the council, like, let's say, a liquor license or?
This
What have
statute, this statute that's cited only pertains to building permits. It doesn't pertain to other things.
The first.
Oh, you have
Second one.
Second one,
The
too.
first
Right, the second one is building and demolition.
Permit.
It permits to no license, any license.
any
issued.
license.
Yes.
If there's no contradicting the charter of Coventry, I don't see why it couldn't be done. I think that would better be suggested by the solicitor. I can say that the Gloucester version was the same as the Exeter version. Folks with who owned homes inside the manufactured parks didn't own the land; they leased the land. And yeah, they got into arrears, and it was easier and cheaper for them to walk away. And then the owner and or town or whoever had to deal with the abandoned property. This change worked very well to get those scofflaws to pay their taxes, or they were stuck in the mud. I don't know if it can be applied to building to all sorts of licenses, though.
All Coventry wants is, we're talking about the second one here, which is 44.7.10.2. Coventry wants to join Gloucester in having the ability to deny demolition permits when they haven't paid their taxes. Yeah. And it would help the town collect, as you said, Representative, outstanding taxes on people who have otherwise just walked away after running up a huge tax bill. It's just unfair to the rest of the people in Coventry. Yeah. And there's nothing in Coventry's charter, I think you asked if there was, there's nothing in the Coventry charter that suggests that the state, well, the General Assembly could do it anyway.
Yeah, it was
Even
very
if
simple.
It was in our charter. You have the authority to make a rule.
So if we got a resolution, then we could submit the change.
All right. This is one of those bills, if you just get it at the right time in the right place, you just might slip it through, so.
Nick, we didn't have a problem with Gloucester. I'm not sure that there would be a problem doing that in town.
Might not.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. President, if I may just pipe in on that,
Sure.
we are also concerned about 44.7.10-1, where Monique was mentioning, we want to be able to stop these businesses that are so far in the rears, and paying our taxes, but yet they're still able to do business every year. We have no recourse to that. So we need, I don't know if it's something that we can do on a local level, or do we need state assistance in that? Because she mentioned several companies that are still actively doing business every day, and it owes thousands of dollars, and we have no recourse.
But do they owe thousands of dollars in property tax of the building that they're located in? Where do they owe taxes to?
No, tangible taxes. The tangible
Okay.
taxes on some of the businesses that they don't pay them, they become significant. We're talking up over $25,000.
But don't you issue them a vitulating license every year to operate in the town of Coventry? No, the hairdressers. You just mentioned the hairdresser.
No, we don't have that. The best example were.
So a hairdresser can operate in Coventry in the business without a license?
Excuse me?
She mentioned a hairdresser. I thought she mentioned.
I'm not aware of a hairdresser. She mentioned one.
She mentioned one.
I'm aware of landscape firms that owed a lot of money to the town, and they were able to escape paying the taxes. We had no hook, we had no authority not to issue them a license to do anything.
But what taxes are they avoiding? Are they avoiding property taxes?
No.
Tangible. Okay, try to tie it in maybe into the state, into the division of taxation, where they would have to get a letter of good standing before they can operate in the town.
Yeah, I'm just wondering that. Have you checked with the Treasury, the Treasury Department? Because if these folks who owe you money have any tax refunds, they may be able to help you. They don't issue tax refunds, especially if you've already got a judgment against them.
I've already asked about that, and unless you have a license number, a date of birth, unless you have specific information about these companies, they can't attach it, because they have to attach it to a person, a license number, a date of birth, and they're all incorporated.
Well, you should be able to get the owner's ID and stuff, and then the Treasury Department can withhold refunds. I mean, they're not going to charge them, but if they have any refunds coming, they won't get them. Yeah, they have they have an owner, they have a tax ID number, they have all that kind of stuff. I'd talk with the Treasury Department and see if they can help you at all.
It's all about having the leverage, though, with all due respect, Representative. And the leverage is found in 10.1. If the town has the ability to deny the license because they're way back on their taxes,
then it's all
that will get them collected. Having to go through the, with all due respect to the Department of, Revenue, it's just, by the time you go to grab their tail, they're gone. This gives us control, just like Exeter has total control. It gives Coventry control immediately within this building to stop people from running off and not paying taxes. And that's why it would be just as expedient for Coventry as for Exeter. It's another simple change. One, you might be able to hitch a ride on another bill.
Council
You just
President.
never know.
Yes,
Will you be able to put in a resolution?
I was going to suggest we do.
I don't have
send it
any
to you.
problem submitting.
Okay.
This is a needed adjustment.
Right, thank you.
We can move on.
Okay, all right. We will move on. Next on the agenda, Councilman LaBossiniere, number 7.
Number 7 is regarding something I've spoken to a few folks about, legislation to mirror what the state of Massachusetts has called Title V regarding septic systems. I had a conversation with Janine Burke-Wells, who's the director of the Warwick Sewer Authority, regarding how we could solve some of our, some of our financing issues and the costs of some of the things that she has had experience with. And one of the few of the conversations that she's been having with not only her legislators in Warwick, but as well as legislators in Tiverton and North Kingstown who are facing the same sewer issues that we are in Coventry. And in short, the Title V Massachusetts legislation has to do with getting tax credits for people who have had to bore the expense of either replacing or repairing their septic systems or tying into a sewer system. The exact amounts, I'm not quite sure, but I believe it was up to a 40%, up to 40% of the cost that they personally bore for that, and then obviously with a cap of $4,500 or $1,500 per year in tax credits for the state of Massachusetts. So we're looking for something to try to mirror that to help our people. And again, it's a statewide issue. There, there are other communities that are going through it as well. So I'd love to see something with there. And I know Senator Kettle and I have spoken with it, so he may have something.
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. President. And Councilman LaBossiniere approached me on this issue, and Representative Roberts, to try and, obviously this is a very difficult situation, with the Hazard Street area, people with this enormous cost of $20,000. I don't have $20,000 laying around, but Warwick has been going through it on the, we've had several years of dealing with the Warwick Sewer Authority and their issues, and again, it all comes down to cost. So, again, this 40% tax credit, I think, is something worthwhile to look at, and we're having legislation drafted up right now, so be introduced in January, and I hopefully the people will come up to the public hearings and, what they like, don't like about it, and to just try and get something to alleviate the burden on the people that would have to hook up to this system. So
it's also with septic systems as well, too.
Absolutely.
And Coventry is, we're mainly septic systems.
Now, when you have to sell your house, you got to replace your cesspool. So that's another added cost, and it makes the environment cleaner. But again, it's a huge burden on homeowners. So.
Senator Absakis, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think, look, this Title V issue, I just found out about it when I received this packet. This town of Coventry has a serious problem with the sewer issue. We know it. Everybody here in the room probably knows about it. Probably half the people are here because of what's happening in Coventry. This delegation also has 2 major pieces of legislation that the council has received a letter regarding giving some relief to the residents, whether it's going to be the interest rate, why the town charges double interest rate when that doesn't make any sense. So there's going to be a piece of legislation to address that. There's also going to be another piece of legislation to address the issue, why are we forcing residents to tie into the sewer system, the assessments where people, we've heard so many public hearings that they cannot afford it. So before we jump into Title V, I think this issue really has to be discussed in detail, and we'd like to find out from the council where we are heading the next several months or maybe into 2018 regarding Coventry sewer plant. I mean, before we jump into Title 5 and try to hopefully resolve a small piece. There's a bigger problem here. There's a huge, serious problem in the town of Coventry that we have not found the answers. And I'm not sure if you're going to see the pieces of legislation that we're going to introduce, whether you're going to be opposed or for it. But I think trying to use Title V in the Massachusetts issue here, we still have a lot of discussion to get to before we even try to even introduce this bill and have public testimony. I mean, we've been haggling this issue in Coventry for not just this year, but probably going back to the inception of the sewer program. And I think a lot of us have questions of the sewer program, and I think the delegation is even going to ask maybe the Auditor General to audit the whole Coventry sewer program to find out where the mistakes were made and where the flaws are. There's a lot of unanswered questions. Before we jump into introducing this bill to try to resolve the problem, I think we've got some serious issues in
Senator,
front of us.
actually, if you look at it actually says septic repairs or replacement first. So it's not just about the sewers. We are loaded with septic systems here as well too, and we're not the only community facing those problems. And that's what in part of the discussion. So I think it would benefit not just people along the sewer line, but many people. I mean, there are some of the contractors that, for a lack of a better term, are all backed up with a lot of work of failing septic systems in this town, as well as the other communities. And that, again, comes with part of my discussion with the director of the Warwick Sewer Authority, who that's her livelihood.
I understand that, but you're not going to resolve by passing. First of all, I doubt very much that this bill's going to pass this year or probably next year. It's probably going to take about 3 to 5 years.
Discussion on it, and
I understand that, but the main problem here today is what do we do with the current situation in Coventry, with the current residents that are in this sewer debacle? Because I really think that we've got 2 pieces of legislation that hopefully you're going to support when the bills are introduced, and we'd like to have that discussion continue further on our pieces that Representative Nunes, he's left already, that he's going to introduce on the House side, and myself and Senator Kendall will introduce on the Senate side. And I think we really have to have a real in-depth discussion. And I wish we did open this discussion to public comment. I believe there is no public comment here this evening, because I like to hear from the folks that are here this evening on their views of this issue, too.
Well, again, Senator, I hear your comments, and it is being worked on. The town manager, the finance director, our sewer subcommittee, it is being worked on. So before, I would recommend, before you introduce anything up at the General Assembly, Senate or House, that you make sure you consult with our town. Because it could be just conflict to what the town, you mentioned mandatory. Mandatory is that so it can be paid for as it goes by. It has to be paid for. And again, one issue is if it's not paid for by the people that receive or can receive the sewer line, and we have 2 members on the sewer subcommittee on the council here tonight, is that everybody may end up having to foot the bill. They have to be paid for. The work that's done, all other work, it's held. It's suspended, and what has been done needs to be paid for. All right, so I'd suggest before, in the wisdom of the senators and the representatives that go up there with their legislation, sort of like the Kent County Water Authority, you consult with the town, and you get our 2 cents worth, at least the town managers, all right, because council people can vary. But I thank you for your comments, and I think that was a good proposal by Councilman LaBossiniere. All right, so...
I have a couple
Oh,
I'm sorry. No, Senator, go.
Say that even this Title V has a cost. You got a tax credit. I mean, who's going to pay? Where's that tax credit going to be reimbursed from? The state, the town?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a cost involved everywhere. What I'm saying, Mr. President, is that we're jumping ahead with this Title V. We've got problems here in Coventry already that we still have not resolved. What's the future of the sewer program in Coventry? Right. And we're jumping in. Well, into
again,
the septic
if
system
I could,
issue.
It's being worked on, and this was only one possible proposal to be considered. We're not saying, pass it, but, it's a topic that works in Massachusetts. It's a law, right? That works in Massachusetts. Maybe Rhode Island's not so far. Maybe Rhode Island's not so different from Massachusetts. I hope that is on the marijuana, but maybe not on the septic systems, the sewer systems, and everything else. And again, I understand what you're saying, but just as long as everybody's on the same page, the town especially, because we have the bills. State, General Assembly, I don't know what bills you pay. I know we're all residents, but I'd say work together, unlike the Kent County Water Authority, Senator, because that, I would prefer it had been left alone, and I think we know that, but we don't want to get into that topic because it's not on our agenda. But Mrs. Bacon, I think...
Mr. President, on this topic, are we leaving this topic?
No, I don't believe we are. Go ahead, Councilwoman Bacon.
Thank you.
It's on number 5 now, right? Title 5.
Yes.
Yeah.
It would have been helpful if we could have had the entire Title V law from Massachusetts. Instead, we just had a small section of it, and it wasn't even, it's from an engineering company. But one thing I want to point out is with this Title V, you need to have an inspection and a certificate. So who's going to be doing these inspections and issuing these certificates? It just seems like it's an added layer of government that we're going to be putting on the residents of Coventry. We're going to probably have to form some sort of a department to go out and do this. So I'm a little concerned in how much of these cost for these certificates going to be, so you have a passing septic or cesspool. And then also what I had read in here with this title, you have to have a Title V certificate if you want to do any improvements inside your home. So this just seems like this is pretty complicated, and we're also comparing the town of Coventry, which we're comparing to Warwick, Tiverton, and North Kingstown. They're coastal areas. Were they mandated by the state to put in to put in sewers? So that's something that we really need to look into.
I don't have all the answers on Title V.
But I'm saying if we had all the information instead of just this one little bit, it would have been very helpful for all of us here tonight. Thank you.
Representative Chippendale.
I just wanted to add that when the cesspools were being addressed by the legislature, I think it was 2012 or 2013 was the last round that we did this, the tax credit element came up, and this was just cesspool, so this wasn't ISDS. This is the old hole in the ground. Right. We adopted a lot of the Title V spirit in the sense that we would allow them to, at the time of title transfer, they would have to have it repaired or replaced prior to. But the issue of tax credits was addressed, and the fiscal note on it was prohibitive. And this was just a very small amount of sewage disposal systems, because cesspools are almost obsolete, or they are obsolete, but they're almost gone, extinct in Rhode Island. So the fiscal note that was given to the Environment Committee was cost prohibitive. I believe that is a good strategy, Councilman. I think that a tax credit is something that would help spur that. I don't know that it'll happen, though, based on finances.
I'm asking you to explore the possibility.
Sure, absolutely.
They've got it in the next state. It's something that it would possibly benefit the people of not only our community, but in many areas around the state.
Absolutely agree.
That's my reason for bringing it forward.
It will go forward. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. President, before you
yes,
conclude,
another comment.
real quickly, we sent you and the council a letter signed by all 8 members of the General Assembly back in, I believe it was November, telling you that we were going to introduce legislation in January, and we still have not received a response. So before January, this letter right here.
You want to respond?
We never got a response from you or the town manager.
We did.
Or the council. Not in writing, we didn't.
Right.
So if you want us to work with you, we need to get some kind of dialogue in writing.
Is that they don't pay until they sell their home? Yeah, I remember it verbatim. Right. And verbally, I think we send you the word. You want it in writing?
Well, we'd like to get a letter back sent to the 8 signatories of that letter.
All right. We'll get that done for you, Senator. All right, moving right along, number 8, Mr. Town Manager.
All right. Number 8's a proposal. There's a memo in your packets that goes along with number 8. This is something that I came upon when comparing one of our town ordinances to a charter provision that the town has in place to what I've found out is a state law on municipal contracts. What I'm proposing that be examined is having the town of Coventry excluded from state statute 4555 because it's redundant in many of the town's requirements. Our purchasing requirements already require anything above $10,000 to go out for bid. The state law has a similar requirement, but it's worded differently where it's for construction materials, and then anything over $5,000 has to go out for bid. So it's contradictory to what the town has in place as an existing law. And I think this is something that might have happened just over time when the town enacted an ordinance and the state law was enacted in 1992. And it's just where the state law was put in place and then the town's ordinance might have been put in place before then. So it's just something that it provides a headache for me and my staff when we're going out for procurement on items.
Mr. Graham, I have a question. I actually looked up, I went to the awarding of municipal contracts 45-55-5.2, and it applies to the town of North Smithfield. Is that the one you're referring to? Because I'm looking at it right here. Are my eyes going? 45-55-5.2.
There is a exemption in place for, I believe it's Smithfield Fire Department, if I'm not mistaken.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Oops.
So there are some municipalities in the state that this applies to. There's also applications to the local government, the insurance, the trust is excluded from these purchasing requirements. Again, the state has both in its, the town has in its charter a requirement to go out for bid for anything over $10,000, as well as a ordinance within its set of ordinances that sets specific guidelines for how the town should go out for bid and purchases.
So if we submitted legislation to exclude you and you had a purchase that you needed to make that was under $10,000, how would you award that contract?
So right now, our ordinance, the town ordinance, provides those guidelines for anything under $10,000 that we can purchase.
Correct.
So usually, right now, our current practice is anything under $10,000, we'll go out, get a couple estimates for. Anything over $10,000, we'll go out for a bid for.
You'd get a couple of estimates.
Correct.
Okay. Well, when I looked this up, in fact, it brought to mind something that I wasn't present for at the last meeting, but I know that there will be a survey going out regarding this sewer assessment, a $36,000 survey. That went out to bid?
It has not, no. So one of the things that also is in conflict between the state law and the town's ordinance is the require for professional services and what is classified as a professional service. The town's ordinance allows the town to contract with professional services such as engineering, attorneys, other such services, where the state law limits that to, I believe, just engineers and architects.
But I thought I read in the paper that a company had already been chosen and identified.
No, we're using our sewer engineer to help us identify a company.
And that doesn't have to go out to bid. Is that correct, Mr. Gorham?
It's professional services. I don't think it's required under 4555, but I haven't, you're the first person that asked me that question directly, so I'm not.
What section on 45?
4555.
Dash 2, there's quite a few sections. There's quite a few sections on it, so we're exactly on 45-55.
There are 17 sections, yeah.
Yeah, there are 17 sections, and it gets really into the minutia of how a municipality should purchase items. And again, it conflicts, a lot of it conflicts with the town's ordinance.
But what section are you asking us to amend?
So
You're going to give us a section.
We're asking to exclude the town from the entire purchasing chapter because it's redundant of what the town already has in place.
So we'd have to make a new section.
Correct. 45, 55, 18.
So you would ask to be exempt from everything of 45, from 4555-1 to 4555-17.
Correct.
And even the penalties?
Yes, because we have our own procurement laws in place.
This addresses qualification-based selection of program managers, construction managers,
Our ordinance
risk,
also has that in place.
emergencies.
Yep.
Competitive
sealed bidding.
negotiations, competitive sealed bidding.
We have that as well.
Right, we have all that. is
Our
what she's
Chapter
trying to say.
56 purchasing provides for unauthorized purchase, subdividing purchases, or contracts to avoid requirements of this article, requisitions of estimates, requirements using agencies, certificates as to availability of funds, disclosure of financial interests, competitive bidding, award of contracts for public construction improvements, preference for local bidders, tie bids. So what I'm trying to point out is that the state law, while it has a lot of requirements in it, is redundant of what the town already has in place. And the town's ordinance is customized for the town.
So
really, it prevents, when we want to go out for bid and there's a conflict between the state law and the town ordinance, it provides a quagmire, to say the least.
I'm just uncomfortable with exempting a town from an entire chapter of state law. I just think it's a bad precedent. That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
All right.
If I may add.
Yes, Representative Chippendale?
Thank you, Mr. Waters. That's a state law, and while your ordinances and charter agree with it to an extent, were the state to exempt Coventry on the basis that you have essentially the same rules, the town could just go right on ahead and change those rules once the law exempted the town. Therefore, that'll never happen, ever. Ever.
But it's already in place for
But not for the same reason.
All right, you can hear.
Okay.
All right, well, topic has been raised. Representative Morgan? Well, all right, let's stay on this topic, all right? And then we're going to have open legislative session questions later, I guess, right after this. Right. Any other, on this matter before us on number 8?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I agree also before Mr. Chippendale said, I agree. I am concerned that we could change our ordinance at any time.
Change our
Charter, in the ordinance. So, no, I would not want to see.
Well, the charter would have to go out to a vote.
I understand that, but we can certainly change that ordinance. If you're concerned with that the ordinance isn't following state law, perhaps we just change the ordinance to
We can
follow
do that.
state law.
Okay.
I think that would be
I was
much
just taking
easier.
the opportunity since it's a legislative session.
I would leave that.
If I may, I echo the same thing, concerns, what if our councils change, every 4 years, and if another council came in and decided to get a charter review commission and change the law, I think, Representative Chippendale is correct. I mean, you would open up a real can of worms, and they would never do that, because, I think it's good that we could probably change our ordinance to match the state if it's pretty close, so I agree with that.
Okay. How about that? Okay. Now we'll go down to 9, and it's, according to the agenda, open discussion on upcoming legislative session. Would that be qualified to that question you had, Representative Morgan?
I had questions for Mr. Tebow.
Right. Well,
And that
okay.
was about my original
It's not
questions.
all right.
And you gave me some answers, but I I'm not quite
Yeah,
sure.
let him get to a mic if he might.
When it comes to your mind. Me.
And while we're waiting, Mr. President, for the record, I just want to submit that Representative Nunes had to leave urgently. He had a family emergency, and he did want me to relay that to the folks.
I
here.
appreciate that. I hope things are okay, but thank you for the information, because I figured there was a good reason. Thank you.
Okay, I asked earlier how much issued bonds or debt, and it appears it's 53,710,000.
That's our debt service statement.
It's tiny.
I'll just speak on your.
You're talking to me.
53.7 million dollars as of the beginning of fiscal 18.
Okay, and what's the bonding, how much bonding capacity do we have?
Approximately 25 to 30 million dollars is 3% of the total assessed value, I believe, by state law.
So you have a total of, is there 80 million is what the total amount you can put into debt?
Yeah, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I believe it's 3% of the total assessed value. And we did the calculation a couple of months ago. A few months ago, we were having a conversation with the town council about additional bonding, and I had prepared a document based on state law that showed we had approximately maximum approximately $33 million we could issue and still be in compliance with that 3%.
Okay, and so then my other question is, I know that the sewers you're asking for additional bonding on the sewers, correct? And how much is that?
The town is not asking for additional bonding at this time. We told the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank last week that we would not be participating because there's a hiatus on the sewer program. So at this time, there's no additional request for bonding.
So all the sewer work that's been done already is in this 53 million?
No, this is a list of general obligation debt. The sewers are a pledge of system revenues. They're not included in the general obligation debt.
So there's debt in addition to the 53, almost 54 million?
Yes.
And how much is that?
One moment, please.
Representative Morgan, the debt that Mr. Tebow's referring to is, again, to reiterate what he said, it's debt that is pledged against the revenues of the sewer customers.
Sure, revenue
So it's
bonds.
not on the taxpayers.
It's not on all the taxpayers, but it's on some of the taxpayers. Is that right? It's
It's on the
ratepayers.
customers of the
The
sewer
ratepayers.
system, yes.
The annual debt service for sewer, including West Warwick, is about $2.5 million annually.
Do you know
And
what the total is?
it's about around approximately $28 million in total.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Any other upcoming legislative session discussion from our school committee, which we haven't heard from in a while, our state delegation, or the council?
Go ahead.
Basically, Mr. President, I think there's going to be a lot of legislation pertaining to Coventry. I mentioned the two about regarding the sewer. We mentioned one regarding the schools. But also, I see the sign in front of us regarding the gun range. Is there any proposals from you or the council to strengthen state law against open gun ranges in Coventry? I know that's a hot issue. I know we addressed the asphalt issue years ago where I had introduced a bill, became state law prohibiting any additional asphalt plants on Reservoir Road or in that region. So I'm not sure if that is a topic to be discussed. I know there's another meeting being scheduled, I believe in January, but is there anything in state statute that we should strengthen to prohibit open gun ranges? That's something that we want to...
I don't have that information at this time. I don't know if anything is being thought of regarding state legislation, to that matter. Obviously, zoning has been determined over the years by the councils. And, like I say, personally, it's up to the zoning board and their decision. I hope they choose well, because I think it could be other places, but we are not one to make recommendations to the zoning. We appoint them to make those decisions. As far as if the council wants to entertain some proposals to send for General Assembly, I don't know if that's needed, but I'm not ruling it out. Counselor, would you think that'd be necessary to make general legislation affecting Coventry, or would that be all over the state? I guess is my question, Senator. Are you talking about all
On
over
the
the
asphalt
state?
plants, it was just for
No.
Coventry, because the zoning ordinances were very weak, and we
Right.
had to introduce a bill to prohibit any additional
understand that.
asphalt plants within the vicinity of a
Right.
school.
Right.
So instead of putting the word asphalt, we'll put the word gun range. So I think hopefully the delegation and I can research it, and if there's something that we need to assist you, in case the zoning laws are weak
Right.
at the present time, I'm
I
not
understand
sure.
what you're saying. Mr. Gorham?
The Zoning Enabling Act, which the General Assembly enacts, I believe gives the town, through its zoning ordinance, through its town council, plenary power to either allow or not allow gun ranges anywhere in town. There was a change in 2012 that allowed them in RR3. Before that, they were not allowed. In 2012, there was an amendment. There was no public comment whatsoever. I reviewed the minutes that allowed the gun ranges, any gun range in RR3 by special use permit. And the President Shibley is correct. It's now in the hands of the zoning board. If the town council wanted to, it could change that permit, change the zoning ordinance to say that it's not allowed in that district. However, even if the council did that, and even if the General Assembly specifically proscribed that by some act, it wouldn't affect the application that's pending, because, there's a vested rights clause that the General Assembly has placed in the Zoning Enabling Act. So, as far as the particular application that's pending, there really isn't a lot you can do right now. But if you wanted to proscribe future applications like this one, there is something that the General Assembly could do, and there's also something that the Town Council could do under the existing Enabling Act. Does that help?
Mr. President, can I ask a question? It's Dave Florio.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't see, I'm sorry.
It'll be a quick one, Mr. President. Mr. President, if the person who wants to do the gun range decides he wants to change the application or the range itself, wouldn't he have to go back, instead of bringing it before the zoning, wouldn't he have to bring it back to planning if that happens? Would you know that, Mr. Gorham? If he decides he wants to change it?
I'm not going to opine on that, because that's before the zoning board right now, and it would just not be appropriate for me to start commenting on that since my firm is representing the zoning board.
Well, to the people who live there, I mean, wouldn't it make sense to let them know if there is or will not be a hearing on January 10th, and if it's going to be sent back to planning?
I really would not be, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on that here, really, in this forum. It just would not be the right thing to do.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gorham.
Very aware of the situation. Thank you.
I think we all are. All right, legislative session topics for the General Assembly, any additional ones? We're on number 9 now? Yes. Councilwoman Carlson.
Okay, here's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Green energy, what it's doing to this town. And I'm not talking about green energy. I'm talking about greed energy. And I have questions for our legislators. Senator Kettle, Rep. Nardolillo, and Rep. Chippendale are all my folk, because you're all Western. And I understand our governor has made some statements and mandated some things that she wants the state to be green energy by 2020. I don't know, maybe it's 2025 now. That's all well and good, but when you clear cut 40 to 50 acres and you take all the trees down, I'm not sure where we then become green, because the green's gone and you can't see it anymore. And you have a commercial solar power plant. It's not as big as Burrillville, but for us out there in the western end, it's mighty big. And we have to look at 10 440-foot wind turbines every single day. Flicker, noise, the whole 9 yards. So my question to the legislators, all three of ours, and then, everybody else, is can you help us? We need to preserve western Rhode Island, and we're not doing it. And I don't mean just because I live out there. I don't see a turbine. I don't hear a turbine. I don't have flicker from turbines. But a lot of people in this room do. And we are worried, and really, really worried that we're losing our way of life. And I think the town council and the people in this room and in this town need to decide, where do we want this town to go? We have a commercial end, and we have a green western end. Are we going to preserve that end, or are we going to let outside developers come in? We're not talking about preserving farmland here. I need you all to think about, do you help us? Is there something you can do to help us? Obviously, we have somebody with their foot in the door. He's trying to put in a power plant. We have somebody else who's not a farmer trying to preserve their property. This isn't about farmers. It's about money. It's not about green energy. It's about money. And, yeah, I get emotional because we're losing our quality of the western end. And I need to know if you're going to help us, if there's anything you can do. If you can't do anything, then we'll just keep fighting it on the town level. But just like we have sewer issues, we have turbine issues, we have gun ranges, where's the town going? And if I sound like I'm on a soapbox, yeah, I am, because we got to fight it now or just give it up. Just give up. I mean, I don't know. If you can help us, that'd be great. We got a lot. We're almost like we're imploding. And I don't know. I mean, when I've been here 18 years, and I'm telling you, none of this stuff seemed to go on. And then all of a sudden, and as somebody said to me, it's because, since 2012, I've been on the town council. No, I don't think it's my fault. It just seems like people are now paying attention, which is great, but we need to save this town. And that's it.
Okay, and General Assembly, any comments on that?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Chippendale.
Thank you, and Councilor Carlson. Certainly, I hope you understand where I stand on this issue. I've been very vocal. I have the unique circumstances of representing a very large district along the western portion of Rhode Island. To my north, Gloucester is the border. We have Burrillville. The big issue is no power plant. To my south is Greene, the southernmost portion of my district, and we see this explosion of renewable energy. What I've seen in the legislature so I'm hearing from both sides. That's the reason why I set it up that way. I'm hearing, and I'm also hearing from everyone else about energy rates going up. So no one's happy, and I get it. In the legislature, since I've been there, every year there is a contingent in the building that increases the renewable energy goals that we should have in our portfolio. Extremely aggressive, 100% completely unrealistic, and what we're seeing is an explosion of, and I will not use the word farm because that's an insult to traditional farmers. We're seeing solar power manufacturing facilities being set up in rural farming communities. We're seeing windmills that I can see from my house in Foster, all 10 of them. I can see them all. I have visited houses in Greene, and I don't know how anyone can argue that the property values have not been completely decimated by the constant disruption of the acoustic disruption, the percussive disruption, the light disruption. Everything about it has destroyed the character of that once precious forested part of our state. I think my position has been made fairly clear. I can sit here and bloviate all night long about what legislation I'm going to put in to stop it, but I'd just be doing that, bloviating and blowing smoke. There is nothing I can do, nor I suspect anyone in this room can do, to stop the overwhelming, powerful tide of green energy that has taken over our legislature, and I suspect will continue to. If you think 56% was a big increase this year, folks, just fasten your seatbelts, because when we get back in, we're going to jack that up even more. And when I say we, I mean the General Assembly. I'm certainly not going to support it or vote for it, but it's going to continue to happen. I feel if there's anything I can do, I'll put in whatever legislation you want. I know we'll get some support here, but I can't promise you it'll pass. They'll laugh it out. They have an agenda, and they will not be stopped.
Well, that's because we have developers who have bought people in the legislature, and they have paid lobbyists up there.
Yes.
And you guys can't fight it. I understand that, but if there's anything you can do.
Looking into the future also, I mean, when the subsidies dry up, and this is all being it's subsidy driven, the developers are coming in because of the subsidies. When that dries up, that quaint industry of making a lot of money with windmills and whatnot is going to go away very quickly. The property rights issue is the biggest struggle. People have the right to do what they want with their property, but when it affects everyone around them, you have to look at it. I don't know that there's a legislative answer, but I'm open to hearing any suggestions from anyone on it.
Councilwoman.
Okay. Yes, Representative Natalillo.
Thank you. Finally articulated the frustrations that we do see by my colleague. You can count on my support alongside of Rep. Chippendale. I agree with you. Moving from Cranston out into Western Coventry, one of the main reasons we moved there was because of the area and the privacy and the beauty of the area, and we are seeing it being monopolized by industries, we'll call them. Okay? But you do have my support.
Senator Kettle.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilwoman, for bringing this issue up. Obviously, this is very important to the people of Western Coventry, and you have my support. The people have always had my support. And obviously, Rep. Chippendale articulated that, yes, you have the private property issue, because somebody could, theoretically clear their land and sell the lumber. There's nothing prohibiting that. But when it affects the people around them, obviously, we have an issue. And I think the one thing that the representative alluded to is these goals for renewable energy. I mean, who can argue against renewable energy? Especially you got the turbines out in Providence, not bothering anybody. But it doesn't meet the demand. And again, that's going to be the problem with going into the future years is with these electric rate increases. All right, well, we don't want the renewable energy because it can't meet the demand, and yet we don't want this power plant. So what's the alternative? Just keep raising the electrical rate. So unfortunately, it's not a simple, solution. But if they can find a spot for these facilities that are, away from our green areas, I think that would be a better alternative.
Well, there's certainly enough parking lots where we can put the solar over the parking lots. We have a landfill on Arnold Road. I mean, I'm talking about our town. It doesn't have to go out where it's going. There are lots of, I know, Airport Road,
I mean, there's a myriad of locations.
Right, but I don't think anybody encourages that. They buy acreage out in our end.
And it's cheaper.
Yes, it's cheaper.
And,
it is cheaper. It's cheaper than, Allmax, all those places. But I appreciate whatever anybody can encourage because it doesn't, renewable energy isn't paying for itself. We're paying for renewable energy in our bills every month.
Okay, Representative Morgan, please.
Councilwoman, have you checked into the zone yet? I'm loud enough.
It's okay. Have you checked into zoning laws? Because my colleagues are right, trying to control it at the state level, there is such a momentum there and such a force, for a lot of reasons, that renewable energy, we've set higher and higher targets every year. And I think the only way that you can protect Western Coventry, and actually protect all of the town of Coventry, is through your zoning. But I don't know if you're allowed to say no, but certainly zoning comprehensive plans should be able to protect you some where you're going to allow installations like that.
Well, our comprehensive plan says that RR 3 and 5 have no public services. They're agricultural, especially 5. It's agricultural, not served by public utilities. So therefore, it's agricultural, farmland. That's the kind of business you can have.
I guess what I'm saying is,
but the problem is, you have to have planning and zoning who uphold the comprehensive plan, and that doesn't always happen.
I think you need to beef up whatever it is you have in your zoning ordinances to kind of constrain it, where you're going to allow it. Maybe you'll allow it at the sand pit or something, but not where there are forests. I think it's in your comprehensive plan, and it really is beefing up your local zoning ordinances, because I don't think we can, realistically, I don't think we can stop it at the state level. And for all the reasons they said, it's really is incredibly expensive. It's 3 to 4 times more expensive than gas-powered electricity. We all know that it's not, it doesn't work at night, it doesn't work when the sun's not shining. For all those reasons, renewables really aren't the answer. But for us to stop it at the state level, realistically, we can't.
Well, I think it's also, some people got their foot in the door and were fast-tracked by town officials before we even had an ordinance. So I'm just bringing it up to see if there was anything going on.
Just strengthen your zoning ordinances.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on upcoming legislation?
Not on that
All right.
issue, but Councilwoman Carlson, I also support your initiative. I think it's going to involve all of Coventry to work together, try to resolve this issue, but it is an uphill battle, especially with what is happening in the General Assembly and the state law and the governor's office and DEM. But we'll keep fighting. The other issue, Mr. President, I just wanted to bring up, and I'm not sure if it falls under the legislative purview. I know we resolved the issue with Johnson's Pond regarding FEMA and the revised flood map. I'm not sure if we're going to need a resolution from our delegation. I know Representative Serpa and I have worked on Lake Tioga, but I'm not sure if we need a letter from the council to the offices of Jim Langevin, the congressman who has been the facilitator for FEMA. So that's another issue that we've tried to address. So we like to see if we can work together to try to get
Agreeable. There's been discussion on that, and we don't see any reason why not. Obviously, I know Mr. Gorham has had some conversation too on it.
I know Mr. Gazzarelli, who's here this evening, has been constant contact with me and Representative Serpa, and also with Langevin's office. But I think the missing part is the town has to make the initial ask, because just like we did in Johnson's Pond, we resolved that, and that was because of the work of the council making that request. So we want to make sure that the council also, with the town manager, makes that same request to...
Yes,
would you prefer a resolution?
No.
You want a letter?
Letter from you, or we can also pass a resolution from the General Assembly requesting FEMA.
No, I'm asking.
I just did, I don't mean to interrupt or correct, but I just did it in West Warwick. There was a section in West Warwick around a watery area, and the people were paying flood insurance, and they didn't think they needed to. So the town council submitted a letter to Congressman Langevin's office asking FEMA to come down and reevaluate that area in the hopes of relieving those people of flood insurance.
Well,
so you folks need to send the letter to Langevin.
Can I meat you after and get your address so we can get a copy of that letter?
I'll get you a copy.
Okay, great. Thank you, Representative.
Can I have one too?
Sure.
A copy? Sure.
I'll have to get it from the town hall, and then I'll get it to you, and I'll get it to you. Okay, I'll fax it right to your office. Okay.
All right. If there's no other upcoming legislation, I'd like to thank all the state reps and senators who are coming out tonight. A lot of information has been conveyed. And I know it's a busy holiday season, and I know next year, Councilwoman Carlson has suggested we meet after Christmas, which I don't know if it's on your agenda, but tentatively, the meeting is set for January 7th of 2019. January?
The 2018? 2019?
2019.
Well, that's
2018 is January. We've already had this
We
meeting.
might not be here. We don't know who's going to be here, but.
That's why it's January. January.
Mr. President, I would make a recommendation that maybe we should meet in a smaller group around maybe April of 2018.
We can do that.
Because we have a lot of questions that have to be answered regarding the school budget.
Right.
And many issues, so.
Not a bad idea. A good idea.
19.
All right, but again, for the legislators, upcoming meeting before the General Assembly starts, it was recommended, and that's why I'm saying it, January 7th of 2019. So in April, we'll be here soon.
Well, we'd like to have maybe, Mr. President, if I make a request, maybe a little bit of a different format, because in 2014 and 2015, when we had this legislative meeting with the school committee, we also allowed public comment. And I know this year we didn't allow it, but
And
I'd like
Senator,
to change that format to get some of the
the
comment from the public.
recommendation, we heard it last meeting in the council, 2015, I'll talk to you about that one and why it decided not to, but that'll be after the meeting, and I thank you for your comments. At this
You're
time,
welcome.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second motion to adjourn. All in favor on the council? Aye. School committee? Do you make a motion? All right. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.